Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Bijuu Sage mode Chunin exams. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Luxord52 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1 Prologue. Prologue. Finally it was over. All over. Pain Nagoto was dead, the Akatsuki were royally screwed, and Konoha was safe, all its inhabitants revived. Then that damned Uchiha and his protege, the team, just had to show up. And then of course it had to turn out that the bastard Uchiha had the Rinnegan as well, and of course he had gotten some Senju DNA from Yamato after he was captured, resulting in the team having it too. During the ensuing battle, Naruto's own Rinnegan was awakened, due to him being the true heir to the Sage of Six Paths. However, as it was merely a first-level Rinnegan, he was no more than a fly to the combined power of the Uchiha's fully awakened versions. As he flew through the air after yet another Shinra Tensei, all he could think was, well, fuck. After all, no matter how hard he had tried, no matter how much he had achieved, he was always considered nothing but a damned demon brat to all of Konoha. Despite that, he still wished to become Hokage. Why? He wondered as he yelled in pain at the force of the kick Sasuke team had just delivered to his spine. Why did I ever want to be Hokage? All the villagers hate me, would want nothing more than to just kill me at this. A boiling feeling of pure, unadulterated rage rushed through his body. The Bijuu within the statue felt this, and began to redouble their efforts to escape and save the boy, the only one who shared their pain of being truly misunderstood. Leading the effort were the Kyuubi, the Hachibi, and amazing all of the Bijuu, the Ichibi. As they struggled, the Ichibi explained that the boy had saved it from a sentient portion of the seal that held it within the Kazekage that called itself Shikaku. The seal portion had overridden whatever control the Ichibi had over its yokai, and took over whenever the Kazekage intended to hand over control to the Ichibi, who knew what his true intents were, and also had better control over the Akai Sunakekei Genkai that the teen held. Shikaku also controlled the mental link shared between all Jinchuriki and their Bijuu, forcing the boy to kill everyone in his way, or he would destroy the boy's soul and mind, take control of his body, and have a grand time killing them for him. Finally, the Bijuu managed to force enough of their remaining yokai into a tailed beast ball, and promptly released the energy. Coincidentally, the man calling himself Madara Uchiha had just launched Naruto at the statue, with both projectiles landing at exactly the same time, in exactly the same spot. The resulting concurrent feedback of Naruto using what was left of his chakra to try and cushion the impact, and the tailed beast ball impacting caused a resonance so powerful, it completely obliterated the statue. The Bijuu, seeing as they only had seconds left before Naruto died, forced all their power into the teen, as well as the very fabric of space-time. The explosion had already weakened the fabric, and the chakra wall protecting it, but the force of 9 of the Bijuu ripped what remained in the area to shreds, while at the same time sealing themselves in the young man, and forcing him through the portal. Chapter 2, Awakening. Chapter 1, Awakening. Ugh, my head, what the hell happened? Last thing I remember was hitting the team's statue, then there was an explosion, then nothing, he thought. As he continued to attempt to recollect the events that had happened prior to his awakening, he was shaken from his thoughts by the sound of voices in his head. 9 of them, if he was hearing right. He decided to pay his mindscape a visit, using a technique Kyuubi had taught him, so he could retreat there if ever need be. Upon arrival, he was surprised to find instead of one large fox, 9 teens, of his age, all with familiar animal aspects. One of the male teens had horns, and the apparent leader of the group, La Femme Fatale in his opinion, had what appeared to be fox ears, a tail, the most vibrant red hair he had ever seen, sans his mother, and the biggest bust he'd ever seen other than Tsunade. On closer inspection, they all seemed to be familiar, so much so that when the realization hit him, he yelled quite loudly. Prior to his arrival in the mindscape, the 9-tailed beasts, after finding one another within the vast plumbing system of Naruto's chakra, convened to attempt to create a plan of action, and figure out where, and when the hell they were. Only the Kyuubi noticed the subtle signs of Naruto arriving in the mindscape, such as the lights turning on over the hallway he always came from, and the chakra pipes going in reverse for a moment. However, it decided to ignore it. As she returned her attention to the conversation, the Ichibi was recommending that they all take their humanoid forms for when they first call the boy within himself. The other beasts agreed, with the Nibi just wanting to jump Naruto's bones for saving its, and its Jinchuriki's, life. That, and as a cat, it was always horny, no matter its gender. The Sanbai, the Yambi, the Gobi, the Rokubi, and the Sachubi were all interested in meeting the boy they'd heard so much about, and had been their savior. The Hachibi didn't really care, as it was making some rhymes for Naruto to use when he fights, a habit which had grown on him from B. Luckily for Naruto, Hachibi was much better at it. Much better. Kyuubi agreed for the hell of it. After all, last time around, it had never shown the boy its human form, and felt it was high time for it. It also agreed on the principle of it being one of the greatest pranks in existence, the art of screwing with one of the sage's heads. Fun times, it thought to itself as it transformed, returned to when Naruto had just caught sight of them. What? The tailed beasts proceeded to attempt to regain their hearing after Naruto's rather excited exclamation. The one with horns, upon regaining control of his auditory nerves, replied with a rather enthusiastic declaration of yo. The Juubi is in the house, to which Naruto rather bluntly replied with a repetition of what. At this point the rest of the Bijuu had regained their hearing, and were all advancing toward the young teen. Welcome Kit, the one with the fox aspect said, at which point Naruto had a sudden influx of knowledge, including the fact that teens before him were the Bijuu, at which point he promptly fainted. Well, that went better than I thought it would, commented the Nibi. Chapter 2, Revelations. Upon Naruto's revival, which took a few hours in order for his subconscious to absorb and peruse the information that was made available to him, his first conscious thought was, Kyuubi's female? Unfortunately for him, because of the way the mindscape worked, his thoughts were transmitted to all of Bijuu as well, most of whom started chuckling. Kyuubi, however, did not. As a matter of fact, her hair was currently flailing about, her bright red fox aspects became menacingly sharp, as a murderous shroud appeared behind her as she cracked her knuckles. At this sound, Naruto, who'd had a little too much experience with the noise from Tsunade, immediately flew into the air, and tore off down the hall near him, Kyuubi chasing close behind, yelling about how she was going to kill the little brat. Yep. Just like Tsunade. Eventually she calmed down, and with a little pushing and prodding from Hachibi, was able to get Naruto to come down off the ceiling, to which he had been clinging with such force, that there were 10-finger-size holes where he had been. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, are you okay? Why Nibi was cut off by Hachibi, who had figured out how the hell to explain what had happened after he blacked out. After the explanation, Naruto was still trying to figure it all out. So, you guys wanted to help me, but the statue had taken most of your yokai, and I just happened to hit the exact spot you guys fired your tailed beast ball at the exact same time. Just the chances of that are Kami knows how high. And now I'm also expected to believe that the explosion also helped rip a hole in space-time, and the chakra wall just happened to be weak enough that you could pinpoint the time and place that you wanted us to be. Pretty much, yeah? You actually should get going. Today's the day of the Shinobi exam. What? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Relax, Kit. Remember, those who hold possession of the highest control of the mindscape can choose the speed of the passage of time within it. In this case, that would be me. I already made it so that only a second goes by in the real world, for every hour in here. Either way, you still better get going, you don't want to risk it anyways. One trip out of the mindscape later. After he had returned to the real world, Naruto got dressed as fast as possible, made some ramen, and in a flash of a dark orange cloak, which had somehow materialized in his closet, an action which the Bijuu swore they'd revealed to him after he became a shinobi, he was dashing across the rooftops, slurping noodles as he flipped, and spun around obstacles. It turned out that, while his body had become that of his 13-year-old self, his skills stayed in proportion to what they had been before, what he and the Bijuu had come to call the rewind. However, since he also had a metric ass ton of yokai now, all of the Bijuu's full power, since they all want to help him, and his own is the Juubi, which I swear I will explain at some point, he had to learn to control it, as well as learn how to create chakra and yokai constructs, and he still had to learn Bijuu elemental manipulation. In other words, it was good that he still had most of his shinobi skills, given that he would have to learn everything else at the same time as keeping up a reasonable facade of his past self, even if only for the day. Upon his arrival at the academy, he heard an all too familiar clamor coming his way. Naruto quickly leaped up the wall, using parkour skills he never knew he had, which for the sake of all characters' sanity, all who are escaping fangirls' shudders shall have, but only for the time needed to escape, and leaped through the window to the hallway connecting to Irika's classroom. As he looked back, he noticed he wasn't a moment too late, as Sasuke came tearing into view, spinning, flipping, and rotating through the crowds in front of the academy with a terrified look on his face. Not 10 seconds later, he could see the bewildered crowd of citizens rapidly being split as a huge dust cloud tore through it, which if he squinted he could see Sakura and Ino bashing civilians left and right as they squealed their battle cry of Sasuke Kayuen, etc. Naruto quickly preformed the henge via the in portion of his yokai, making it unbreakable even to Kurenai, which made him look exactly as he had on the day of the exam the last time he'd taken it, aka the time before the rewind occurred. He even remembered the stupid jumpsuit. The only reason he had even worn the thing was because it was the only thing the villagers would sell him, and even then at 3 times the normal price. Just thinking about the bigoted villagers made his blood boil, as his eyes began to turn into those of a Bijuu, with long, slitted pupils, Celeria as red as Kyuubi's yokai, and his irises became the same deep blue as his chakra. Luckily for Naruto, the henge hid this fact, for at that moment, Irika opened the door. Naruto? You're early? He said as he looked at the boy quizzically. HM? Oh yeah, I guess I am at that. The boy replied with a strange look in his eyes. Well, you might as well come in, I was just about to start preparing the exam. Would you mind giving me a hand with the target dummies? Sure, I don't have anything else to do. 2 hours later. Finally, all the students had arrived, and the exam was about to begin. Class had started, as per usual, with Sasuke running into the room, a completely terrified look on his face, scanning the room as he came in, searching for an empty seat that had people sitting all around it. Finally he found one, in between Naruto and Shikamaru, both of whom merely said, Mendokus to the whole thing, at which point, both boys looked at each other with the exact same look of bored surprise on their faces, as they had said it at the exact same time. Dashing through the room, Sasuke managed to flip himself over the row in front of the two lazy students, landing straight in the seat. At the exact moment he sat down, the door was torn from its frame as Sakura and Ino blasted through, both with their fists forward, showing that it was they who had destroyed the door. As they slid to a stop, the both immediately searched the room for their precious Sasuke, and once they located him, they were at the end of the row so fast, many a casual observer would have thought they had used the Hiraishin Jutsu, Naruto/Shikamaru. Sakura and Ino respectively yelled, "Get away from my Sasuke-kun!" Once again, ironically, both boys responded with a firm reply of, "No. I said move, lazy ass." "No, Naruto/Shikamaru." Luckily for both of the young teen skulls, it was at that moment that Iruka-sensei used his Hedo Saicho Jutsu. "Quiet. Thank you. Now then, as you all should know, today is the day of your graduation exam. If everyone would please follow me to the exercise field, we can commence the ranged weapons portion of the exam." Once outside, they began. As expected, Sasuke performed extremely well, getting 8 out of 10 of the stationary targets, and 7 out of 10 on the moving targets. Shino was the next best, getting 7 out of 10 on both. Sakura did fairly well, with a 7 out of 10, and a 6 out of 10. Surprisingly, Hinata got the best score of all the girls, with double 9 out of 9s. Finally, it was Naruto's turn. As he came up to the mark, he said something to Iruka-sensei. Iruka appeared to be considering it, then shrugged, and nodded. At this signal, Naruto appeared to put his hand into thin air, and pulled it back to reveal several enormous Fuma shuriken, all just somehow floating around his hand. He proceeded to merely point his hand at the targets, and all of the shuriken took off. Each was so large, it cut its target perfectly in half, and then banked, and took out the corresponding moving target. Much to everyone's astonishment, Naruto, after launching the shuriken, just stood there, staring at the clouds lazily, much like a certain Narayer, who was also staring at the clouds. After they all got over their astonishment, they proceeded to the arena. All of the girls, sans Hinata, expected for their Sasuke-kun to win, despite the way Naruto blew them away at the target range. And yet, despite Kiba defeating almost everyone, and Sasuke finishing him off, Naruto still completely destroyed Sasuke, in an impressive display of the academy style, mixed with the fur and fang style that Kyuubi had taught him, which consisted of concealing himself, and then shredding his opponent in a blur of cold steel. Since it was a pure taijutsu, he merely used his brute strength. After Sasuke was revived from being slammed into the wall, they returned inside, amid the clamor of the feminine portion of the group, none of whom ever thought that Sasuke could ever have lost, except Hinata, of course. Once they had all arrived, Iruka began to hand out the written portion of the exam. During the hour they had for the written portion, every last student managed to finish it, albeit Kiba nearly ran out of time. Once all the papers had been handed in, Iruka began to call the students into the next room for the Academy 3 Jutsu test. The first to be called was Choji, who returned to the room after a small parrot wearing a gleaming Konoha headband. Then, Shino was called, and returned to the group of awaiting genin to be within 5 minutes, sporting some new headwear. Slowly, ever so slowly, more and more students were called, and more genin returned. Upon Sasuke's return, all his fangirls, cheered in happiness. Then, it was Naruto's turn. Upon his entrance to the room, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. Glancing around, he noticed the seal tag on the ceiling, which held the word disrupt. He continued to look around, so as not to appear suspicious. Last time around, he had failed this portion twice, due to his chakra control going to shit at the last second of his Bunshin Jutsu. Then Mizuki had offered him the alternate test. The time-traversing young teen figured this was why he had failed. Mizuki had used the seal to disrupt his chakra control, causing him to lose control of the jutsu. Go figure. At the nod from Iruka, he quickly formed the seal that was by now completely ingrained in his memory forever, and with a shout of, Oryoku Bunshin no Jutsu, Harem Edition, and a puff of smoke that filled the room, Iruka and Mizuki found themselves surrounded by Naruto's Naruto persona 10 of them. So, can you tell which one is the real one? Asked the one in the middle. Let's see, the one 4 from the left, replied Mizuki. With a puff of smoke, it was revealed that no, it was not. The process went on for a few minutes until only one remained, the one that had spoken first. So, you must be the real one then, huh? Questioned an impressed Iruka. Nope. With a smile and a small wave, the last Naruto disappeared. What the? But how? Mizuki wondered, an astonished look on his face. Iruka proceeded to calmly open his ninja tool pouch, and pulled out an odd kunai, that appeared to be made of a metal the exact same color as Naruto's hair. He threw it in the middle of the room, and with a crack of displaced air, and a puff of smoke, a smirking Naruto was revealed, much to Mizuki's surprise, and Iruka's growing amusement. Wabu, when the hell did he get in your pouch? Mizuki exclaimed. During the smoke from the bunshins, I used the henge to turn myself into the kunai, had one of the Oryoku bunshins put me in their pouch, then preformed a kawarimi to switch with one of Iruka-sensei's kunai. Naruto said with a smirk on his face. Mizuki's jaw fell even further, while Iruka's grin grew. Well, I'm convinced. Methinks that we have our genin of the year for the rookies. Iruka said, genuinely impressed with the display. Naruto's performance today had been the best he had ever seen or heard of, outside the Yondaime Hokage and Itachi. He took the only remaining headband off the table before him, and with a quick hand seal, summoned a scroll. Taking out a brush, he began to write on the scroll, detailing what had happened. Placing it, and the headband on a seal engraved in the desk, he poured some chakra into it, and both vanished. While waiting for a reply from the Hokage, he explained to Naruto that all of the teachers' desks, and all of the desks belonging to high-ranking ninja had the seal, with the purpose of acting as a message delivery system, with the teachers' desks being able to only send things between them, the scroll file system, and the Hokage's office. The ninja desks could send it between themselves, the scroll file system, and the Hokage's office, but the two systems ran on different channels, with the officials' desks being marked priority. The seal itself had been created and implemented by the Yondaime Hokage himself. It was so complex and ornate that to this day, not even Jiraiya of the Sannin, a sealing master himself, could replicate it. Naruto expressed a great interest, so Iruka gave him a permission form to go to the ninja library and research it. Finally, the reply came back, along with a much different hideate, of which the headband and medal were both the exact dark orange color as Naruto's cloak under the henge. As the Hokage loved Naruto like a grandson, and knew what his favorite color was. Well, congratulations Naruto, looks like the Hokage agreed to make you the student of the year. Iruka informed an elated Naruto after reading the scroll. Oh Soroshi, damn demon brat, I bet all I had that he was using the beast to beat Sasuke, thought Mizuki as he forced a smile onto his face as he shook hands with, and congratulated Naruto. He immediately began to formulate a new plan to obtain the Kinjutsu scroll. Back in Iruka's classroom, all of Sasuke's fangirls were attempting to fawn over him, while he continued to run like hell around the room, at one point grabbing and holding on to one of the rafters. Unfortunately for him, the fangirls began to pile up and climb over each other, forming an ever larger pillar. Seeing this, he was about to just run out of the room entirely, but at that moment, Iruka, Mizuki, and Naruto all entered the room. Hey, what are you doing here, Dobe? This room is only for those who actually passed the exam, yelled Kiba. Why do you think this is, dumbass? Naruto replied with a smirk. Now that we're all here, Iruka interrupted, I would like to announce the Rookie of the Year, Kunoichi of the Year, and other such rankings. On he went, from the bottom up. The students were getting more and more curious about what else Naruto had been hiding from them this whole time. Higher and higher the ranks went, until only the top 2 male positions, and the top 2 female position remained. Kunoichi of the Year goes to Hinata Hyuga. At this, most jaws in the room completely hit the floor. Everyone had been expecting Sakura to get it, as she was the smartest, or so they thought. And yet, looking back on the day so far, it wasn't really a surprise. Hinata had been the best in ranged, beaten them all in taijutsu, had always done well on tests, and was the Hyuga clan's heiress. They really should have seen that coming. As soon as most of the class had come to this assumption, and Iruka was done waiting for them to calm down, he cleared his voice and the title of Rookie of the Year goes to Naruto Uzumaki. What? The angered fangirls' cries could be heard all the way to the Hokage Tower, the namesake of which could be seen sitting reading the new Ika Ika parodies, with large earplugs visible. Why is the dope? How did that idiot win? Why? Was the resounding clamor of the room. For one thing, Naruto was the only one of you all to receive a 100% on his ranged exam. He beat all of you in taijutsu, received a perfect on his written exam, and managed to pull off 10 kage bunshins, hinged himself into a kunai, and used kawarimi to switch himself with one of my kunai. All in all, he got 112%. The next best of all of you was Sasuke, who has earned the award for best parkour skills. Now, in a week, your teams and your Jonin sensei will be announced, so be sure to be here by noon. See you next week. At this announcement, the class began to disperse. As he headed over to Ichiraku's ramen to get some food, Naruto couldn't help but wonder if who his Jonin sensei would be. Guess I'll find out later. In the meantime, ramen! He screamed in his head, making the Bijuu within him shake their heads in amusement. Once he got to Ichiraku's, he decided to see if anyone would recognize him without the henge. He backed into an alley, and after making sure no one was around, let the henge fall, and walked around the corner, and under the banner. Welcome to Ichiraku's ramen, what can I get you? Asked I.M., wondering who the teen wearing a dark orange cloak and a Konoha headband to match was. Wow, guess I did change, huh? Said the teen, looking like he was deep in thought. Excuse me, sir? I'm kinda sad you didn't recognize me. I am Nasan. And Naruto? Yep. Wabiyu Howen, she blubbered. Well, you see, that's quite a tale. And so, the orange-loving genin began to tell the story, quietly, so no one would overhear. Now remember, you can't tell anyone till I've cleared it with the Hokage, okay? Well, duh. Altoag, I somehow can't think of anyone who would believe that tale anyway, not without you there as proof. That's true. Speaking of the Hokage, I suppose I ought to go tell Gigi. That you should. See you later. Another time, and thanks for the ramen. At the Hokage Tower, the immense tower stood before the even larger Hokage monument, gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. After he had reached the tower, Naruto did a quick scan of the area via chakra pulse, and redid his henge. On his way to the tower, he had noticed the slight looks of attraction, occasional lust, and envy from every male in town. Not particularly wanting to get jumped in the streets, he had immediately taken to the rooftops. Once he was sure the henge was in place, he entered, and made his way up through the tower. The Hokage's secretary tried to stop him from entering the old man's office, by claiming that he was in a meeting, but Naruto knew the old Hokage's habits, and right now was his Ika time, no exceptions. Not counting emergencies. Hey Gigi! Would you look what I got? Naruto cried out as he entered the vast office. He noticed the slight blush on the old man's face as he attempted to put the book away, but slipped out of his chair, and fell flat on his face. After he was done laughing, and several death threats from the fallen leader, Naruto helped him back up. You don't know how proud of you I am now, Naruto. Going from the 3-time failure, to the Rookie of the Year. Yeah, about that. There's a reason for my sudden improvement. Oh? And might I ask where to procure similar drugs? The old man joked. Very funny, but the truth is, I am not the Naruto you once knew, do tell. I'm actually my future self, sent back in time by the Bijuu, to stop the one who falsely calls himself Madara Uchiha, to have a chance at a better life, and to become both the true heir to the Sage of Six Paths, and the Juubi. I'm supposed to believe this, why? Easier to show you I guess. Baijitan, Bijuu Bunshin Ichikyu, Tailed Beast Release, Tailed Beast Clone, 1-9, he exclaimed as he channeled the Bijuu yokai within him, a slight demonic growl, reminiscent of his past run-through entering his voice. All at once, with a rather loud crack, the Bijuu appeared in their Bijuu aspects forms, and Naruto stood there in his full, unhinged glory. Needless to say, the tales of how fast Hiruzen Sarutobi's jaw dropped, and the amount of floors it crashed through, are still told, and still theorized on for generations. Upon recovering from the shock, and Naruto dismissing the Bijuu, the aged Sarutobi reached for the door, and stuck his head out, informing her to forget the sound she had just heard, and to make sure no one came within the next several hours. Withdrawing his head, he turned to his desk, and after running through a few seals, activated a seal on his desk. Instantly, the walls turned to steel, the windows ceased to exist, and several loud cries of surprise occurred as all of the Umbu within the room were simultaneously ejected to the roof. Seeing Naruto's impressed look, he explained, another bit by the yondaime. I presume you know of your heritage? After getting an affirmative, he sighed, and continued, well, that's a conversation I'm glad I didn't have to have. You are of course aware of the fact that if news of your feat, and your heritage get out, all involved will have to be executed. Not my decision, but one I'm glad to enforce. Unfortunately, the council always finds some way to override it, despite my continued attempts to have those responsible for your childhood publicly executed. I guess I should inform you of who your Jonin-sensei will be? Again, Naruto nodded. I don't know if this time will be any different, but you have Anko Mitarashi. I'll inform her of the circumstances. You will also have permission to inform your teammates of your history at your discretion. Due to you receiving Rookie of the Year, I'm placing you with Hinata Hyuga. Your third teammate shall be chosen by Anko, who will have first pick of the genin. Yes. I get to be with Hinata. Do I detect a hint of attraction, or dare I say love? Ihihei. It doesn't really matter to me, I just find it amusing. I might even have Jiraiya write a book on it, one along the lines of the one you were named for. Sure, why not? When you tell him to write it, also write to Tsunade, and inform both of them that their godson is in fact alive. Oh, and you might want to arrest Mizuki, he's planning on stealing the Kinjutsu scroll, and selling it. Very well, would you like a sip of sake before I must throw you out to the throngs of Naruto fangirls outside? The elderly Sarutobi asked nonchalantly. Sure, why no fangirls? Yep, said the old man as he deactivated the seal, and looked out the window. Looks like about half the Sasuke fangirls are now devoted to getting a piece of you. You might want to henge into one of your Bijuu, minus the animal parts before you leave. Baijitan, Hachi Henji no Jutsu, Nigan no Katachi. Tailed Beast Release, Number 8 Transformation Jutsu, Human Form, the terrified rookie cried out, instantly turning into a man who looked rather a lot like Killer Bee, but with dark orange hair. Once this action was preformed, he immediately flew out the window, and across the adjacent rooftops, dodging flying glomps as he went. And Chapter 2. Chapter 3, The Day of Rest. All was quiet within Naruto Uzumaki's little rundown apartment building. When the village orphanage had thrown him out on the streets at the age of 7, the Hokage had granted him the rights to the room. Of course, all the villagers who lived in the building immediately left. Citing unstable tenant in room 666, the Hokage had proceeded to hand over the rights to the whole building to Naruto. The apartment complex itself was an 8 stories high dome, with the top floor being the owner's suite. Each floor held one more room than the one above it, with the 7th floor having 2, the 6th 3, and so on. Over the years, Naruto had begun to furnish the building with whatever he could find, tables lying in alleys, the odd chair being thrown out, and the crown of his finds, an immense, semicircle couch, made of some of the plushest materials, thrown out by one of the Hokage's advisors within a month of its purchase, because it was apparently uncomfortable, and bizarre. It was in Naruto's apartment by nightfall. Once he had unlocked his room's door, and disabled the seals he had put in place immediately after the exam. He summoned the Bijuu in their human forms, and demanded they tell him how they had materialized the cloak that morning. About that wasn't us, Kit. It was you. Would you mind explaining how that works? By using the Onmyoton that you have due to being both the Juubi and the new Sage. Yin-Yang release? I guess I should get used to it. At that, he told the Bijuu to do whatever they wanted, so long as they stayed within the building, and began to attempt to create random things, such as kunai, shuriken, and swords. His results were, well, admirable. As a modern art piece. What the hell? I could do it before, with the cloak, and the Fuma shuriken. Hearing his annoyed exclamation, Q poked her head in. Bit of trouble, Kit? I can't even make a freaking kunai, much less a sword. Well, when we were little, the old sage always looked like he just mentally told something to exist, and it did. Might as well try it. With a loud crack of displaced air, the largest TV Naruto, or the Bijuu for that matter, had ever seen appeared. Holy shit! The Bijuu, and the sage exclaimed. What was the holy shit? Cried Hachibi as he came into the room. Meh, what's going on, holy shit? Exclaimed Sachibi, as did all the other Bijuu who had entered with him. Quick, make an Xbox! Was the first thing out of Hachi's mouth after he got over his shock. Several loud cracks later, every imaginable system was sitting under the TV. Then, with another loud crack, there was a huge pot of ramen sizzling on the new stove, a bed in each room the Bijuu had claimed, and a shiny new computer sitting next to the TV, all with the Yuzusho Kagure emblem shining on them. Several hours later saw the Bijuu and the sage all sitting on the couch, watching Naruto face off against Hachi in the new Ninja Clash game, titled Shinigami Clash. Naruto was playing as the guest actor, the Yondaime Hokage, and Hachi was playing as the lightning demon, Rai. The Yondaime's model was that of the outfit he wore to face the Kubi. Rai's model was similar to the appearance of Killer Bee, but with dark blue skin, hair rather like Kakashi's. The most distinguishing characteristic of Rai was his glowing electric blue eyes. That, and the large bolts of lightning that jumped between points of his hair on occasion. Hachi's tactic consisted of rapidly jamming the quick attack button, while Naruto's consisted of liberally applying Hiraishin seals all over the arena, and Rai. Upon the completion of this task, he began to use the Hiraishin to teleport behind Rai, grab him, and continuously flipped between the other ones, dropping him, flinging him around, and just generally wailing on him. At last, Rai was down to his last bit of health, and all Naruto had to have the Hokage do was go over and poke him in the forehead. Rai immediately fell over backwards, landing flat on his back, unconscious. A rather obnoxious game over, winner Yondaime Hokage, screen began to flash, before Hachi turned off the TV. So now what? Asked Naruto. Now? We train you in your Bijuu skills? Said Q, and within seconds they were all in the mindscape. Over the next few hours, Naruto's real body was covered in a cloak of multicolor yokai, slowly transforming the time-traversing teen's body into that of, simply put, the best ninja he could be at the moment within his mind. The landscape had changed drastically. The 10 Bijuu were standing in what looked like your average field, if you ignored the various hunks of rock, craters, and dead bodies. Naruto was standing in the middle of it all, panting heavily. I think that's all for today, Kit. Tomorrow, you get to meet Anko, and Hinata again, and whoever Anko shows us as the third. Q relayed to the sage. YOSH. Naruto cried, and promptly fell on his butt fast asleep, in both the mindscape and the real world. End Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Baka no Hentai Sensei. It was a beautiful Monday morning, if such a thing is indeed possible. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and in two separate apartments, on opposite sides of the village, a certain blonde, and a certain dark purple pineapple head, were both having rather similar moments. Their days began as such. What time is IAGH? I'm late. The duo then began to get dressed in a flash, still unaware of their unison. Ramen/dango. If one were to stand in the middle of town at this point, you would be able to hear a cacophony of gulping and slurping noises. The genin and the jonin both then took to the roofs in a flash, converging on one place. The academy. Welcome, young genin, to the first true day of your shinobi life. In a minute, I will be calling out your teams, and your jonin sensei's name, so when they enter, please find them and the rest of your team. Irika announced, looking proudly over the young teens who were not so long ago still his students. Some time later, Team 10 is Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akimichi. Your sensei is Asuma Sarutobi. Finally, Team 11 is Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, and Fury Yasagi. Your sensei is Anko Mitarashi. Hinata and Yuria both looked around, found each other, and were confused as to the location of their teammate and their sensei. The next instant, the door and the window opposite each other burst open, the causes of these events both yelling out, I'm not late, am I? At which point, the oddly in sync duo stopped, and stared each other down. Who the hell are you? Naruto Uzumaki/Anko Mitarashi. Why the hell are we in sync? Can you two calm down a bit? Asked the slightly terrified Irika. Why, you're startling the genin. Oh, sometime later, on the roof of the academy. So why don't you three tell me something about yourselves? Anko suggested once they had reached the roof. Why don't you go first so we can have an example? Hinata asked nervously. Alright, let's see. My name is Anko Mitarashi. I like dango, money, and pranking. I don't like lecherous old men, burnt dango, and traitors. My hobbies include pranking, being a pervert, and eating dango. Now you first, bunny man. At this, Furia fumed a little, but began regardlessly. My name is Furia Yasagi. I like rabbits, listening to the wind, and good suits. I dislike unchivalrous men, lecherous old men, and seeing beautiful women cry. My hobbies include, but are not limited to, playing video games, being a pervert, and practicing kenjutsu. Next up, the legendary blonde Gaki. Naruto's ears twitched, but he calmed himself, informing the Bijuu to remind him to prank Anko's house next. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like foxes, ox octopuses, demon rhino beetles, slugs, dolphin horses, apes, giant turtle crustaceans, monster cats, tanukis, and ramen. I extremely dislike perverted old men, such as a certain white-haired Konoha elite, men hurting a woman, and assholes. My hobbies are kenjutsu, taijutsu, ninjutsu, fuinjutsu, genjutsu, senjutsu, sagejutsu, pranking, hurting lechers, and eating ramen. Wow. Okay, Mademoiselle Hyuga, you next. Okay, my name is Hinata Hyuga. I like my family, practicing music, and reading. I dislike Kiba Inuzuka, he's creepy, are rapists, and perverted old men who want nothing more than to take advantage of innocent young women. Almost thud. Hinata had fainted immediately after saying more than any of the conscious trio had ever heard her say before. Luckily, Naruto had seen this coming, and had caught her before she could even hit a 45-degree angle. Well, see you guys tomorrow, I guess. Training field 44, at 7 in the morning. Oh, and don't eat breakfast, if you plan on surviving. With that, she disappeared in a cloud of leaves. Naruto and Furia said goodbye, and parted ways after waking up Hinata, and informing her of what had transpired. The trio all headed off to their respective homes, excited, and ready. Chapter 5. The True Exam. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and Naruto was late. He had awoken to the sound of the Bijuu yelling at him from within his head. He was so late, he had barely had time for his usual 10 bowls of miso, 7 of pork, and 3 of beef. At this point, he was dashing across town, trying to avoid the early bird fangirls. Unfortunately, he wasn't succeeding. Just when he thought that his luck had run out, he discovered that they weren't following him anymore. Looking around, our hero noticed the fact that there was an enormous forest behind him. He also noticed the fence, which held a sign saying Training Ground 44 Caution, keep out unless authorized. Well, I guess Anko authorized us onward. He yelled within his mind, causing the Bijuu to shake their heads and sigh a little, due to how fast he had bypassed the warning signs of death. As the blonde speed inward through the forest, he wondered if the others had done the same. Shrugging, he continued toward the center until he found the tower that the second round of the Chunin exams had concluded in, and had held the preliminary portion of the third round. Ah, good times onward. Once again, the blonde got a sigh for his troubles, but he ignored them. After all, he got to be with Hinata-chan, and Furia had never been mean to him, either time around so far, so he chose to like the desert dragon rabbit once inside. He discovered that the place was clean and looked lived in. As he headed toward where he remembered the arena was, Naruto either peeked into every door he came across, or created another Kage Bunshin to continue searching the place. Upon arrival at the arena, his Kage Bunshin all dispelled at once, leaving him with a head crammed full of the layout of the entire building, which appeared to be completely empty. He immediately made a mental note to have the Bijuu, who were becoming bored out of their immense minds, sort through Bunshin memories automatically, saving him from a splitting headache, and giving him the information he could use. Admittedly, his bizarrely overpowered healing factor took care of the headache quickly enough, but it was still annoying. Naruto, up here! Whirling around, Naruto looked up to the sight of both Hinata and Furia chained to the ceiling. I didn't know you guys were into that stuff, Naruto said teasingly. Hey! Excuse me for not being able to hold my own against Anko, she's a Jonin, we're Genin, and your point is? Wait, what? The whole point of this exam is teamwork. Why do you think they put us in 3-man cells? So we can try and outdo each other at every turn. No, the point is for us to work together and try and get the bells. There are only 2 though, and whoever doesn't get one has to go back to the academy. But if there are only T2 bells, then what if Naruto-kun doesn't get one? Or gives it up for one of us? Hinata's shy Hinata persona thought. We will not let that woman hurt our Naruto-kun. We must be strong. For Naruto-kun, her stoic Hinata persona replied. Alright, let's go. Wonder Twins powers activate. Form of Shinigami dance. At this, Hinata's chains began to glow the same sky blue as her chakra, and a second later, completely shattered. As she fell, she gracefully flipped, and landed in a similar manner to a cat. Hey! No one told me we didn't have to stay here! Furia shouted, his chains becoming coated in sand, then with a sound like a buzzsaw, they were shown to be disintegrated into more sand. As he fell, a pair of wings made of sand formed on his back, slowing him down for a graceful landing. Strapping on his katana, and his wakizashi, he nodded to Naruto. At that, they left immediately, though not before Furia had left some Hensuna Bunshins in the same predicament as they had been not too long before. The trio nodded to each other, Hinata and Furia both taking one of the headsets that Naruto offered, plugging them into their ears. They immediately took off in separate directions, hoping to distract Anko if she was watching somehow. She was also quite impressed with the way they were using the communicators without actually saying anything, just letting the words die in their throats, letting the vibrations be transmitted. She also noticed the fact that they seemed to be closing in on her position. Deciding to stay put and test their true teamwork, she just kept waiting. With Naruto and the others, I had Kage Bunshin search the building when I first came in. The only place they couldn't go without getting dispelled was right above the main door. Then let's get going. At that, the intrepid trio burst through the door, weapons at the ready. The sight before them was not what they expected. Anko? You are aware that you're half naked, yes? Naruto bluntly asked, while Furyu turned away, blushing furiously. Yep. Shall we begin? I don't see why not. Q Gundam 00 OST fight. The pair of knowledgeable ninja flew at each other in a flurry of blows. Naruto seemed to be holding his own, but was beginning to be pushed back. Seeing this, Furia flew into the fight, still blushing furiously. The sound of metal hitting metal was heard, and as the genin duo jumped back, they noticed that Anko was now holding two kunai. Bring it. She taunted, and the three tore toward each other. Finally, Hinata decided to try and turn the tables. She crept up behind Anko, and once she got close enough, proceeded to target a nerve cluster at the base of Anko's neck. That would knock her out for a while. However, Anko had fought gentle fist users before, and had been expecting this. Right before the hit landed, Anko spun, bashing Hinata on the head, knocking her out. Hinata! Furyu, get back! Why? I can still fight. Yeah, but I'm about to take this up a level. Turning to Anko, he called out, let's step things up a bit, shall we? A demonic growl seeping into his voice as he began to channel Shura's, Ichibi's name, yokai. Why not? Bring it, Gaki! Q Gundam 00 OST, counter-attack. Once more, the duo flew into battle, Naruto's katana, which he had made on the fly unbeknownst to Anko and his teammates, clashing with Anko's kunai. A kami-fucking katana? Where the hell did he get that from? Was all that ran through Anko's mind as she continued to clash with the blonde teen. The battle raged on, sword hitting kunai being blocked by sword. However, since it was Naruto she was fighting, and as everyone knows, katanas are always better, her kunai were eventually cut in two. As she backed away, attempting to pull out more, she brushed her hand past where on her belt she had secured the bells, only to find them missing. End Gundam 00 OST, counter-attack. GKI. When the hell did you? How do I even want to know? She exclaimed. You honestly didn't not see the Kage Bunshin that were searching the building? As soon as they found you, asleep, they took the bells, and Kawarami'd with the bells between three of my kunai. Damn it, I knew that nap was a bad idea, but no, I had to have it anyway. Ah well, at least I got to have it. Looks like you guys pass, nice teamwork. Now, to one of my favorite places to eat to celebrate. And with that, the newly forged Team 11 went, and ate dango, got drunk to all get out, as according to Anko, if you're old enough to kill, you're old enough to drink, and went home with hangovers, and a buzz of excitement that they would start their missions in less than 3 days. That, or it was the booze. End Chapter 5. Chapter 7, Initiate Mission. A quick note, my current upload schedule for this is once every Wednesday, and Sunday, and only on Sundays every other week. This is variable, depending on if I actually get around to writing the chapter in question, so for the next 2 weeks or so, expect more info on the OCs within this story, and only a story update every Sunday. However, I will take any OC ideas you have, just put them in a review, and I should get around to reading them promptly. I currently need characteristic ideas for the Bijuu, and possible genders for Sanbai through the Sachibi, 3 through 7 tales. Also, any random character you can think of, and accurately describe, along with their abilities, outfits, and possible rank advancements / current rank, are much appreciated. Without further ado, Chapter 6, Initiate Mission. Alpha in position, Theta in position, Phi in position, Nosferatu in possession of target, preparing to return to base. The trio on standby gave a sigh of relief. They had just taken their first mission, and it had been, of all things, to recover Tora. The cat had a reputation for escaping its owners, the daimyo's wife, Grasp. Luckily, Naruto and Hinata both had an affinity for cats, but due to Naruto's suspicions that Tora wasn't merely an ordinary cat, but a Bakeneko, monster cat, given the fact that he currently held the leader of their species within him, he thought it best to go himself. Gaki, how the hell did you do that? What? All I did was go up to her, and asked her nicely to come with us. She promptly jumped into my arms, started purring, and has been there ever since. Fine, whatever. You're still going to explain why you have 2 SS rank secrets assigned to you when this is over. Suppose I should have expected that to come sooner. After returning Tora to the crushing grip of her owner, the quartet headed out. Following Naruto, they finally reached his apartment complex. Naruto, you live here? Which room is yours? All of them. He proceeded inside, deliberately ignoring the jaws that were laying on the sidewalk. Once they had all picked up their facial features, the shocked trio headed inside. Shall I give you all the grand tour? The building is 8 stories, each with half the rooms of the one below it. For example, the 8th floor has only one room, while the 7th has 2, the 6th has 4, and so on. The top floor is also the owner's suite, namely, me. Naruto, how in Kami's name did you get an apartment building? Well, that has to do with the 2 SS rank secrets assigned to me. The punishment for revealing these secrets, unless I allow it, is death. You must not breath a word of what I am about to say outside this room. The fascinated 3 before him nodded enthusiastically. Very well. There is something you must know. 14 years ago, when the Kyuubi attacked, the Yondaime didn't kill it. He couldn't, due to it being a mass of sentient, corporeal chakra, known as yokai. So, he had to seal it within someone. Unfortunately, due to the Kyuubi's immense amount of yokai, he couldn't seal it in just anyone. He had to seal it in someone whose chakra coils hadn't developed yet. Who do you know that was born 14 years ago, on October 10th? No way you? Have the Kyuubi sealed in you? You're lying! Furia cried. Sighing, Naruto lifted his shirt, causing Hinata and Anko to blush upon seeing his chest. Channeling some chakra into the seal, the trio before him felt their jaws fall away from their faces, landing on the floor yet again. The sight before them was the Uzushiyobikure symbol, but with 11 swirling lines within it. Between each of the lines was a different color, in order: a sandy tan, a blazing blue, a purple gray, a brown red, a very light turquoise, the purest white, an iridescent green, a bright purple, a blazing red, and finally the purest gold swirled with a royal purple. Hint hint, those are the Bijuu's symbolic colors in this. There will be a test. And they will probably turn up again, not just in the color of the yokai. He pulled his shirt down as he let the chakra dissipate. Now do you believe me? Gaki, I've seen all of the scrolls on the seal the Yondaime put on you, but all of them said it was a hack no Fuin Shiki, 8 trigram sealing. Not whatever seal that is, and that has to do with the second SS secret. I am actually not the same Naruto that you knew. Well, I am, but I'm not. I am the original, sent back in time to relive my life the way it should have been. The third SS secret is that I am the true heir of 6 paths, the Jinchuriki of the Bijuu, the Juubi incarnate, a Kekii Genkai vampire, and there's probably something else I'm forgetting. Needless to say, if their jaws could have dropped further, they most likely would have. Fury was lying on the floor, frothing slightly at the mouth. Anko was siding in the corner, crunched into a ball, murmuring slightly insane nonsense. And Hinata? Hinata was out cold. Fuck, guess I have to snap them out of it. Chapter 8. Crash of the Wave, Fall of a Titan, Part 1. Gaki! Wake up! We've got a mission! With one final crash, Naruto awoke to the now familiar sight of his door being torn to shreds as Anko continued to pound on it. Upon hearing the prospect of a mission, Naruto instantly materialized his outfit around him, consisting of dark orange shinobi pants, a black shirt, his cloak, his headband, his tool pouch, and his sword, which the Kyuubi had called Kitsun's tail. See DeviantArt for sketches and models. Opening the poor door before Anko could completely obliterate it, the duo headed for the Hokage tower, Naruto slurping ramen as they tore over the roofs. Within the Hokage's office. Team 11, this will be your first C-rank mission. Your job is to escort Tazuna the bridge builder to Nami no Kuni. You should know this if you're still here. But Wave Country, and to protect him while he completes the bridge that will connect our countries. You should expect to encounter some bandits at most. They shouldn't give you much trouble though. Now I suppose you ought to meet the client come in Tazuna, the Hokage elaborated. The sight of a drunk man walking in is not usually a good sign when it comes to judging a client, but when the first sentence out of their mouth is, "These brats are supposed to protect me," has a tendency to piss people off. Specifically, one blonde Bijuu. And what, might I ask, the hell is that supposed to mean? That none of you look like you could stop a baby from walking into a wall. Want to try saying that again, dipshit? Naruto replied, a hint of demonic essence reaching his vocal cords as he threw some killer intent at Tazuna. Tazuna responded by falling over in pain, as if he had just been punched in the gut, but in reality had just been sobered to the extreme by the sense of immediate doom. Naruto, it is generally considered bad for business if every customer attempts to kill themselves before the mission is even accepted by the village. Alright Gigi, I'll let up but a note, Tazuna-san. Never, for your life's sake, underestimate me. Alright, good. Glad we're clear on that. So, which way are we going to get to Nami no Kuni by? I've arranged for a friend of mine to meet us with a boat, and transport us in under the cover of night. We leave in 2 days. With that, the shinobi took their leave, and headed home to pack. The next day, the sun was up, the birds were singing, and Naruto Uzumaki was sitting on the head of the Yondaime Hokage. All around him, there was a small clearing, where it could be seen was a monument in the form of one of the famed Hokage's Hiraishin kunai. If one of sufficient training were to look closely, they could see that the kunai was a working copy, and that it had been used recently. They could also tell, if they were so inclined, that the Naruto Uzumaki sitting on the monument's head was merely one of many, all meditating in various locations around the mesa that made up the monument. All of the clones were sitting perfectly still, seemingly doing nothing, but in fact gathering nature chakra. The purpose of this was to see what would happen if Naruto were to dispel them all at once, and if the clones could choose which instance of Naruto to send the gathered chakra to. However, collecting the necessary nature chakra, without access to Mount Mayabuka would take an insane degree of time, even for so many clones. So here they stayed, gathering and waiting. In other news related to the blonde baka, Team 11 had gathered at the front gate of Konoha, and were waiting for Tazuna to show up. Naruto and Fury were playing poker, with spectacularly entertaining results for Anko and Hinata, for Anko knew of his insane luck from her time acting as an umbu guard for the boy, and decided to share this little fact with Hinata. Fury, however, was informed of no such thing. As a result, he was losing Rio rather quickly, each new game betting more in desperate bids to get his money back, and continually losing. An excerpt of the banter from these games goes as such. Ha! I have you now! Straight flush. Oh, poor me, seems I just have a let's see, if that's a king, and that's a queen royal flush. Why, how do I even want to know? I'm just really lucky. I swear I didn't cheat. Yeah, gimme my damn a while back. Nope. It's your own damn fault for betting against me. Fine. Blackjack? 10 minutes later. Ha! 39. Let's see 42. The universe is just screwing with us now, isn't it? Yep. You brats ready to go? Tazuna cried as he finally arrived. The ninja were surprised to see that the bridge builder was quite sober, and was in fact prepared. Shrugging it off, Team 11 and their charge turned, went through the gate, and headed out. Some time later, they had been walking all day, and it was now noon. Tazuna had explained that Nami no Kuni had once been the greatest trading empire ever known, until Gato had come into the picture. He was originally just a small-time dock owner, but as time went on, he began to buy up more and more of the other shipping companies, until about 2 years ago he had finally taken over the last one. He immediately began taxing the general populace, to such an extent that Nami no Kuni had gone from one of the richest civilian countries in the world, to the poorest. During this conversation, Naruto had noticed a puddle, despite the fact that there hadn't been rain in the area all week. He alerted Anko via hand signals, who nodded, and replied to just keep walking. Seconds later, the puddle burst upward, revealing 2 shinobi, both formerly of a ninja village, and whose opposite hands were connected by a chain and their gauntlets. The newly revealed duo burst forward, encircling Anko in the chain. A tug later, and Anko burst into a puddle of blood and gore. 1 down, 4 left, the brothers announced. Charging toward the remaining ninja, they suddenly found themselves unable to move. A quick glance at their legs revealed that their respective limbs were completely trapped in sand. All attempt to free themselves was met by the sand offering more resistance. The entrapped duo suddenly burst into smoke, revealing 2 logs. Whipping around, Furia found himself looking a quick death in the eyes, only for the brother that thought to attack him being blasted out of the way by an angered Hinata. Within Hinata's mindscape, gasped Furia-san. No, we will not let you hurt our friends. Stoic Hinata cried as she took control of the body. She dashed forward, charging as much chakra into her middle fingertip as was physically possible. With a cry of Shinigami no Dansu, Tenshi no Ikari, the pent-up chakra was released, forcibly exploding the tenketsu that she hit. The attacking brother was flung into a tree that was at least 30 meters away, and hit it with such force that he was stuck in it. The other of the two, growling in anger at what the girl had just done to his brother, pressed the button on his gauntlet, disconnecting the chain at both ends. With a cry of pure rage, he dashed at the now unconscious girl who had used almost all of her chakra. Just before his clawed hand hit, he found himself stopped by the boy who had until then done nothing, but now looked almost out of his mind with rage, as a cloak of what looked like purple mixed with gold chakra. But that was impossible, no one had chakra like that. What was the most surprising thing was the sword the boy had used to block him. I had the look of a long, pure white claw of roughly katana length, with 2 smaller claws acting as a hand guard, one facing forward, the other back. The hilt of the sword has 2 hand lengths, and had what looked like a pull brake attached to it, with a purple tail-shaped ribbon hanging of the end cap. However, the Rouge Ninja had little time to admire it, as within seconds his head found itself removed from the main body. And with that, Naruto fell into unconsciousness. With a groan, Naruto opened his eyes, only to close them immediately due to the brightness of the light. Opening them again, he noticed that the light level was actually quite dim. ACH, my head. QB, what the hell happened? Damn Kit, I'm impressed with you 3. First Furyu, who managed to hold down 2 Chunin ranks, and hold of one in direct conflict, Hinata, who managed to create and use a technique like that in the heat of battle, and you, who both managed to summon Kitsun's Fong, and unlock the Baijutan, which does explain why you were knocked unconscious. I unlocked the what? The Baijugan. A dojutsu only available to Bijuu, and their Jinchuriki. It allows the user to see through walls, people, and genjutsu, in the process revealing tenketsu. It also gives the user photographic memory, whether it is active or not, and the ability to zoom in and out when it's active. It does all this at the cost of an insane amount of yokai, so much that even I can only keep it active for a day at most, and then I'm burnt for the year. But when you have access to all of our yokai, you could have it active indefinitely. Author's note, grand total, including his own chakra, Naruto has 56 tails worth of yokai within him, but his brain subconsciously shut it all down, except for Shuras to begin with, and after unlocking this, he gained access to 1 tail's worth of his own. It regenerates at a rate of 1 tail every 3 days, but each yokai reservoir regenerates individually. For example, if he uses all of Shura's yokai, and 1.5 of the nibis, it would take 4.5 days to regenerate. He could roughly, once it's all available, recreate the sun at the time of its birth, and give it enough mass to sustain itself till the end of time through creation of all things twice. How much yokai does this thing take? A tael's worth for an hour, half of which would leave you exhausted. Oh my. Kit, be very careful with this. Most, if not all of us have misused this, or used it for too long, and wound up having to kill the instance of ourselves that was active to get any yokai back in a reasonable time slate. And regenerating from death takes 6 months. At this revelation, Naruto was left speechless. Not only because of how much power it took, but also the risks involved, being mostly dead for 6 months, just to be able to do anything that required chakra? He wouldn't even be able to train, much less keep in comparatively good health. Realizing that there was someone in the room with him, he strained his neck to see who it was. His efforts revealed that it was Hinata, Anko, and Furyu, all asleep by the door, leaning against each other. Smiling at the sight, he put his head back down, and forcibly put all the energies available to him to healing him actively. Doing this deprived him of the chakra needed to stay conscious, and his head promptly hit the pillow with a soft thud, asleep before it even started falling. He rewoke several hours later to the smell of sizzling meat and fried vegetables. Getting dressed sluggishly, he managed to drag himself downstairs, not even wondering at the fact that they were in a house. Finding himself in a small room with furniture consisting of a small table, 4 pads, and an inanely large amount of food on said table. He sat down at the table, took up a pair of chopsticks, and began to eat with great vigor. Within minutes most of the food had been devoured, and Naruto lay back, a contented look on his face. Realizing that he should probably have checked the house for hostile chakra signatures before he did anything, he proceeded to do so, only to become shocked at the fact that Anko, Hinata, and Furyu's signatures were all flaring high, against what was the largest signature Naruto had seen since the rewind. Jumping to his feet, with a large cloud of smoke, he reappeared outfitted for battle, consisting of a pair of dark, blood-orange shinobi pants, a similarly colored set of Anbu armor decorated with the same emblem as his seal, beneath which a mesh shirt was to be found with the ends of its sleeves becoming visible beyond where the armors ended, an equipment pouch, and Kitsune's fang on his back vertically aligned. With that, what looked to most to be a pointed board made of sandstone appeared before Naruto, who promptly leapt onto it, and was immediately forced forward by a small wave of sand beneath the board. A few hours earlier, Anko had taken Furyu and Hinata out to train at a nearby lake, seeing as they would most likely need to hold off whoever else Gato had hired to take care of Tazuna, and considering that they had barely survived the last battle due to Naruto's intervention, a fair amount of work was needed. Okay kiddos, I brought you here to teach you guys tree and water walking. Both are necessary in most situations involving enemy shinobi, and since you two just barely avoided dying in that last battle, we have a lot to do. To perform these 2 skills, you have to channel just enough chakra to the soles of your feet, and if you're wearing shoes, to their soles, and keep the amount steady. If you use too little, you'll just fall off the tree, and if you use too much, you'll be sent flying by the resulting explosion of forcing that much chakra into a foreign object. Use a kunai to mark your progress. Go! This went on for most of the morning, until finally, Hinata made it to the top, having previous experience with channeling and maintaining chakra so as to better use the Juukin, and promptly managed to blow up the branch after forcing too much chakra into it by accident in her happiness. Said blast launched her in the direction of Furyu's tree, and more specifically, Furyu himself. With a crash, the two fell to the ground, injury being prevented only by the presence of a conveniently placed Anko. Hearing a dark, echoing laugh, the 3 leapt to their feet, with blades in hand. So you guys are the team Konoha sent to protect the bridge builder, huh? Looks like today is going to be the easiest one I've had in weeks. Anko-sensei, who is this guy? And what the hell is he talking about? Furyu requestioned. His name is Zabuza Momochi, a Nukenin of Kiri. He was one of the last generation of the 7 swordsmen, and was the only survivor of his graduation exam. How strong is he? Well, simply put, unless we get some help, we're fucked. Blast your chakra as much as you can without a significant drain. Maybe Naruto woke up. Heh, it doesn't matter who comes to help you, you're all dead. With that, Zabuza burst forth from the tree, charging straight for Furyu. With a flare of sparks, the oversized butcher's knife met chakra-forged alloy, and the 2 forces began to fight for dominance. Seeing an opening, Furyu quickly flipped back, flinging kunai as he went, with Anko and Hinata providing covering fire. While Zabuza was busy deflecting them, Furyu dashed forward, and with one slice cut Zabuza in half. The trio all had a look of shock on their faces, until they witnessed it revert into a puddle of water. Damn, if that was just a Mizubunshin, then how strong is this guy really? See for yourself. Turning toward the sound, Furyu barely had time to raise his Wazakashi before Zabuza was upon him. With a flash of compressed metal, Furyu found himself without a sword. Drawing his katana, he turned to block, only to have his sword again ripped from him. Is that it? Really, I'm surprised, the student of the snake mistress of Konoha, and you can't even hold your own against me. If that was all you had, I think I'll go take care of the other 2 first. Bastard, I will not lose to the likes of you. In a flare of chakra and sand, Furyu's swords were returned to him, and a lap and mask had materialized upon his face. What looked to be a cloud of sand materialized into wings, and an array of swords, all okatana length, appeared behind him. Shurkai, Usagi no Dansu, Hayako no Suresu. In a flash, he was upon Zabuza, blades flying all over. Damn it, what the hell? What is this technique? The only thing I've ever heard of that had control of sand to such a degree was the family of the 4th and 3rd Kazekage. But how the hell did their Kekei Genkai end up in Konoha? Not 2 seconds after thinking this, he failed to block one of the blades, the impact of which blew him backward. Pulling himself up off the water where he had landed, he noticed the boy was moving slower. So, looks like that move uses a hell of a lot of chakra. Good. I can use that. At that, he took off, leading Fury on a chase through the surrounding jungle. Fury was slowly losing momentum, and finally, after the 3rd lap of the lake, fell down in a heap near Anko. So, looks like the brat couldn't keep up after all. Go figure. Who's next? Hinata, you need to go and get Naruto. Now, H-High. Oh no you don't kiddo, you're not going anywhere. Zabuza said as the Mizu Bunshin that he had just made overtook Hinata and stopped her from going any further. Damn it, Hinata! Anko cried as she dashed toward the Bunshin. However, to Anko's surprise and Zabuza's shock, the Bunshin burst, revealing Hinata cloaked in her chakra. A closer inspection revealed that she was expelling chakra from every tenketsu. Such an inspection was granted to Zabuza, as she appeared in front of him, and proceeded to beat the shit out of him. He finally managed to bring up his sword, only to find it the recipient of several Jukin strikes, all at critical weak points. God damn it! Why the hell wasn't I told that there was a Hyuga on their team? Seeing that his blade could only hold for so much longer, and not wanting the hassle of having to regenerate the blade from that many pieces, he leapt backwards, only to see that Hinata was still coming. This led to yet another chase around the lake, ending in exactly the same way. Hinata lay exhausted next to Furyu, while Anko was left to fight him by herself. With a flash, the 2 Jonin-level shinobi leapt at each other, and a long, extended battle began. However, Naruto had finally arrived, and had already sent Kage Bunshin to go and take Hinata and Furyu back to the house, which he had figured was Tazuna's. Looking back to the field of battle, he witnessed the 2 go through clash after clash, jutsu after jutsu, until finally, in a feint, Zabuza managed to catch Anko in a water prison jutsu, leaving her helpless and drowning. You can imagine his surprise when the arm that was sustaining the jutsu was hit by a Fuma shuriken, forcing it to move, releasing the jutsu. Turning in the direction of the flight path, he discovered that there was what looked to be another shinobi, presumably of Konoha. Realizing that Anko was long gone, most likely recuperating in the brush, he flung himself toward the team. He was shocked at the sight of the blade that the boy blocked his swing with, and was shocked even more so by the fact that the teen hadn't even put up an effort. He had just brushed him away. Screaming in rage, Zabuza took a wild swing at him, only to find that it was an afterimage. Spinning his head revealed that the boy was now behind him, the blade held to his throat. A feeling of dread overtook him, until several sanban seemingly sprouted from his neck. Turning, Naruto was greeted by the sight of a Kiri Hunter Nin. Who are you? No one of consequence, but you should know that I have been searching for this man for a long time. I thank you and your team for their assistance. No problem. One question though, Hunter Nin-san, Naruto said as the shinobi picked up Zabuza's body. Yes? Aren't all villages' Hunter Nin squads given orders to destroy the body on sight, so as to prevent possible accidents? Damn, he knows. I have to get out of here. With that, the Hunter Nin disappeared in a Mizu Shenshin. Ah, and I wanted to play too. Ah well, there's more where that came from. He turned to find Anko limping toward him. Anko, are you alright? I'm fine, Gaki. Just a few broken ribs, maybe a bruised ego, but I'll be fine. I just need to sleep with that. She collapsed into his already waiting arms. Taking a moment to create a Kage Bunshin to gather all the tools used, he took off toward the house at full tilt. To be continued. Chapter 8. Crash of the Wave, Fall of a Titan, Part 2. Anko woke up, and began her morning routine. She went through the stretches, and the chakra exercises, and was about to unseal the weights from her scroll when she suddenly fell flat on her face. Upon hearing the resulting cry, Team 11 was in the room within a minute. Gaki, what the hell happened? I can't even move my arms. Anko requisitioned as the 3 helped her lay back down on the mat. Taking up seats that Naruto created, the trio looked at each other, and nodded. Anko-sensei, when you fought against Momochi-san, you used most, if not all of your non-necessary chakra, the result of which was your chakra is running on autopilot, leaving you unable to move. Furyu informed her grimly. How long should it take for me to be mobile again? Why you should be mobile by this afternoon, but you must not, under any circumstances exert yourself, or use any chakra. It could kill you, Anko-sensei, Hinata told her, having been the one to run the diagnostic jutsu that Naruto had taught her during their training in the previous weeks. Great, I guess you guys have to protect Tazuna. Sorry to drop this on you, but it's the only option until help arrives from Konoha. I sent a summons back with a message as soon as I saw Zabuza, so we should have support within a week. Good, because that's the amount of time we have till he heals. Seeing the others stare at him, he sighed. I've been through this already, remember? Admittedly, the fact that I'm this powerful, and you guys are my team as compared to Sasuke, who the first time around was an asshole, and Sakura, who hasn't changed a bit. She may even have become more annoying, although that may be due to me absorbing traits from the Bijuu, as well as developing my own. But no matter, we only have a week, no matter of the changes, because those pressure points that Hunterine hit were ones that only fully wear off in a week's time. You two need to train, and Anko needs to heal. I'll leave Hokage Bunshin here to keep an eye on things, and you, Anko. Furia-san, Hinata-san, I'm afraid that due to the fact that Anko-sensei is incapacitated, I must take control of this mission, as permitted by Gigi. Gigi, you mean the Hokage? That's the one. Now follow this Bunshin, he'll take you to a secure place to train. Hi! With that, the newly summoned Bunshin and the two genin left. Well, Anko, looks like it's just you and me. So it is. Do tell, how in Kami's name did you beat him? Anko wondered aloud. Simple. He pissed me off, and I beat the shit out of him. The sword you saw is called Kitsun's Fang, and it was a gift from Q-chan. The technique was a move I've been practicing for quite some time, Shuinpa, Flash Foot, which I used in coordination with Ashi no Kantai, Burrito no Fury, Fleet of Foot, Swing of the Blade, Naruto elaborated. That move? No, it couldn't be. Only Kushina-senpai knew that move, because she created it. Anko reeled at the shock. Naruto? Yes? Where did you learn that last move? The clan scrolls at my father's estate. Yes, I do know about my heritage. Naruto said in response to Anko's sigh. Honestly, you thought I wouldn't? Let us examine the similarities. Slim, huge amounts of chakra, blonde hair, cerulean blue eyes, likes orange, best seal master since Jiraiya, and of course, the greatest jutsu creator in the world. The differences list is much smaller. Married, not married, Bijuu sealer, Bijuu/Jinchuriki, and as per usual, Hokage, not quite Hokage. It's just a little obvious, don't you think? Mendokus. And just when I thought this would be an easy mission, said a lazy voice from the door entrance. The two turned to see Shikamaru standing there. Shikamaru, what are you doing here? Did you hear any of that? Naruto asked with a hint of terror in his voice. I'm here because despite being lazy, I still travel fast than my team, mostly so I can sleep sooner, and because we're your reinforcements. Yes, I did hear all of that, including the part about you having apparently going through this already. The others should be here in a few hours. Would you mind explaining what I just heard? I swear I won't tell anyone else. Sighing, Naruto began to retell his story in the same fashion he had told his team. Needless to say, the fact that the tale got Shikamaru to widen his eyes as much as was physically possible was an indicator of just how fantastic it was. That, and the minor detail that his hair popped out of its tie, and went into a full afro, that happened to have at least twice as large of a radius as his hair did when it was tied up. Further proof was not needed as the now afro-ed Shikamaru fell over backward and unconscious with small bolts of static arcing across his hair's pointed tips once the tale was over. Fuck, not again. Some time later, the rest of Team 10 had arrived, Shikamaru had been revived, and Furyu and Hinata had been recalled from their training. They had reached the point in their training where the both could make it up and down the tree, and the Bunshin had them running up and down the tree to increase stamina and reserves. As it turned out, Team had also begun work on the tree climbing exercise, but only that morning. Shikamaru had made it up just fine, but had promptly fallen out of the tree due to using too much chakra. Ino had made it up half the tree, but had almost fallen face first to the ground, had Asuma not caught her. Choji's first try sent him skyrocketing due to using enough chakra to preform his human boulder jutsu. Luckily, he landed in a nearby lake. The Neo trio were shocked at the fact that they had survived an attack by two C-class Nukenin, and had beaten them both as well, but that shock was blown away by the fact that they had almost taken down Zabuza Momochi. They talked until it was time for dinner, brought by Tazuna's daughter Tsunami. While the two shinobi teams were scarfing down the delicious food, an air of despair entered the room. Turning to the door revealed that it was coming from a young boy, about the Hokage's grandson's age, looking like he had just been hit by a Ki blast at point blank. You're all going to die. None of you can stand up to Gato. Just go home, or he'll kill you too. Leaning back with an annoyed look on his face, Naruto sighed. Kid, he has no chance of killing me. No one has any chance of killing me, and believe me, I know. Don't you get it? None of you are anywhere near strong enough to beat him. He'll just kill you, like he did to everyone else. None of you have had to live like we have. You've all had plush, easy lives, with no need to work for anything you needed. You never lost anyone, just sat there in your house, and ate 3 meals a day. He fell to his knees, gasping for air, and slowly looked up in terror. In front of him was the image of Shinigami itself, and the Shinigami was pissed. You little shit, you really think you know what it's like to live a harsh life? I was thrown out of the orphanage when I was 4, and had to live on the streets for a whole year before the Hokage found out about it, and gave me my own apartment. I had to check my entire room for any traps before I even sat down. I was beaten almost every day of my life, and you know what happened on my birthday, every year? A mob, 3 times as large as normal, would chase me until I couldn't go any farther, and then beat the shit out of me until, hopefully in their opinion, I was dead. And all because of something that happened when I was born. We know nothing of hardship, of pain? Bullshit. Now, I am going to leave this house, and I will not be held responsible for whatever happens to anyone who follows me. And I do mean anyone. He said, looking pointedly at Enko and Asuma. With that, he flew out the door, slamming it with enough force to put a crack in the hinges. Not 2 minutes later, the sounds of immense explosions, and screams of rage. No one moved for a few minutes until the remaining ki had dissipated, wherein they all sighed in relief. Enko-sensei, is what Naruto-kun said true? Hinata questioned, not even noticing the kun suffix she had added. With a sigh, Enko nodded. Yes, it is. All of it. Naruto was orphaned the night of the Kyuubi attack, the same night he was born. Ignoring the gasps, she continued, Naruto was beaten every day of his life, and especially on his birthday. All of this was due to something he couldn't control. You all know the story of how the Yondaime defeated the Kyuubi? Receiving an affirmative from all but Tsunami and Inari, who had heard of the feat, but had never heard the whole story. The legend goes that 14 years ago, the Kyuubi attacked Konoha completely out of the blue. The last intel we had on its position was that it was somewhere completely off the known map, apparently sleeping. No one knew what had provoked it, but it was huge, red, and enraged. That was the same night Naruto was born. The fight to protect the village took hundreds of lives, and all of the attempts to hold it off were in vain. Most of the current Jonin, including all of this year's graduates sensei, were between 7 and 10 at the time. We were all tasked with getting the civilians to safety. Once we had reached the safe houses, we saw that the Yondaime had summoned all of his great toads, Gamabunta, Gamajiri, and Gamakura. If you looked closely, you could see the Hokage on the head of Gamabunta, charging the largest Rasengan anyone had ever seen. It was almost half the size of the Kyuubi. The last time anyone saw the Kyuubi, that was in an explosion of chakra. However, this was not the end of this tale. The Bijuu aren't bloodthirsty beasts as most civilians would have you believe. They are sentient chakra masses with their own form of energy, called yokai. You can't just kill one, it will just be reborn in about 6 months. The Yondaime had to seal away the Kyuubi, but he couldn't have put it in himself. That much power required unformed chakra coils to be able to hold it. So he had to seal it in a newborn child. Naruto was the only birth that day. Why you mean? Tsunami stuttered off. Yes. Naruto had the Kyuubi sealed in him only a few hours after he was born. The sealing cost the Yondaime his life. However, before he had died, he had left the Sandaime with 3 instructions. The first was for Naruto to be put in the orphanage till he could live on his own. The second was that Naruto was to receive the best apartment that was available in the entire village. The third was that Naruto was to be treated as a hero. The first was ignored when Naruto was thrown out on his 6th birthday. The second was ignored when the council forced the Sandaime to put him in what was actually the worst room in the entirety of Hai no Kuni. And the third was never listened to. The civilians, and a fair amount of the younger Chunin, all tried to kill him on a regular basis. Naruto survived over 1,000 assassination attempts by the time he was 2. He was malnourished, weak, and lonely. The only people who were friendly to him were the 7 Umbu who protected him, including myself and Asuma, the owner of Ichiraku's Ramen, and his daughter, Tenten of Team Guy, and the Sandaime himself. The assassination attempts were worse on his birthday, to the point that the Hokage himself had to intervene at least twice, because not even we could keep up with all of the hostiles. No one can ever claim they've had a hard life in front of him without risking him exploding in rage. Enko-sensei, why did people try to kill him? Why would they ignore the Yondaime's wishes? Furia asked. Because of the damned civilian council deciding not to tell the public, and inciting rumors that the boy was Kyuubi reincarnated. Not a one of them had ever even read a book on sealing. It's not that the seal puts the sealed conscious in control. It's as if you were to put an explosive tag into a solid steel box. Yes, there's risk that the tag will affect the integrity of the box, but it isn't the box, and the box isn't the tag. With a loud crash, they turned to see rain begin to fall. The fires of Naruto's raging would soon be put out, and the emotions of that night would be washed away. But the inhabitants of that house would never forget what Naruto had gone through. Chapter 9. Crash of the Wave, Fall of a Titan, Part 3. Amid a large clearing, filled with boulders, craters, and crushed trees, a lithe figure was to be found searching through the debris. The figure came across the center of the area, which was completely untouched. In the middle of all that devastation was a young boy barely older than they were, sleeping soundly. The figure, upon recognizing the boy, began to inch toward him. Long and lean fingers began to creep toward the sleeping teen's neck. As quickly as they had advanced, they retracted at the stirring of the body. The boy opened his eyes to the sight of a girl about his age, picking flowers. "Did you do all this?" she asked quietly. "That I did. I was a bit too angry to do much other than destroy last night." "I see. So that's what those terrifying explosions were. Sorry about that. Can I help you find what you're looking for?" "Yes, I'm collecting these plants to help a sick friend of mine," the girl replied, showing Naruto one of the plants. He nodded, and began to search for others. After about 20 minutes, they had gathered plenty. "Thank you. I must ask, are you a shinobi?" At his nod, she smiled. "Do you have any precious people that you fight to protect?" "Hi. I fight for my village, and the people within it. I fight for my team, my life, and most of all, those who need not die. Thank you for your answer. I'm afraid I must take my leave of you now. I wish you well. Oh, and in case you weren't aware, I'm a male. At this, Naruto snickered. And what might I ask is so funny about that? Oh, nothing except for the fact that you smell exactly like woman in heat. The figure stopped, its body completely taut, and then relaxed a moment later, and continued onward, deciding to ignore that comment. Shinobi-san, the next time we meet, I fear we may be at odds. I advise you to prepare to the best of your abilities. Its piece being said, the figure vanished into the trees. At Tazuna's house, Tsunami could be found preparing a hearty dinner for her father and his escorts when a knock came at the door. Opening it, she found herself at the tip of two katana, wielded by two unsavory characters. They advanced across the threshold, pushing her back until she hit a wall. One brought out a rope, and proceeded to tie her up. She all we need? Yeah, Gato said we just need the one. Although, I wouldn't mind a shot at that stinking brat. As if on cue, Inari walked through the door. And Mom? What's going on? Inari, honey, get out of here, get out now. Find Naruto. He might be the only one able to help. Why she was stopped by a strong smack across the cheek. Shut up, you stupid bitch. Forget the kid, let's just get to the bridge. As the one holding the end of the rope turned to leave, he felt a sharp pain in the back of the head, and everything went black. His partner turned to find Inari standing on the man's back, frying pan in hand. You will not hurt my mother, Inari cried as he leapt at the man. Just as he was about to reach him, he found himself sitting outside next to his unbound mother. Twin screams could be heard from within the house, before Naruto walked out the front door. With a cheeky grin on his face, he questioned, what did I miss? At the bridge, the scene was that of devastation. Several chunks of the bridge were now missing, and the entire area was covered in a deep mist. As Naruto approached it, he chuckled. Futon, Rankuden. Wind release, drilling wind bullet. As the mist cleared, he found his teammates locked within a dome of rectangular mirrors, with the Hunter-nin from the other day leaping around within it, launching Saban at them. Hinata was holding off as many as she could, but due to the blind spot of the Byakugan, couldn't get them all. Fury was attempting to smash through one of the mirrors via drying it with salt he had gathered from the river around them. Anko was to be found at blade point with a very surprised-looking Zabuza. Naruto smiled, and immediately unleashed another Rankuden at the dome of mirrors, shattering them utterly, leaving the Hunter-nin at Furyu's sword. Anko had taken advantage of Zabuza's distraction, and had started to charge toward him. Immediately before she could shove a kunai where no kunai should ever be, she found an interruption in the form of a bone-colored sword. Naruto, why are you protecting him? He's going to kill us if I don't kill him first. No, he's not. Because if you try, his accomplice will most likely try to protect him, losing us two possible allies at the same time. Kid, what the hell are you talking about? Zabuza asked the time-traveling blonde. I hate to have to be the one to tell you this, Zabuza, but Gato betrayed you before you even took the job. He's been waiting to kill you when the job is done. Speaking of midget assholes, here he comes now. To both of the missing Nin's surprise, at that exact moment, Gato and what seemed like a small army of mercenaries appeared at the end of the bridge. So, it would seem the great and powerful Zabuza and Haku can't even kill a woman and her little brats. So much for your reputation. Boys, whoever brings me his head gets an extra 100,000. The stubby man said in a mocking tone, as the mercenaries charged forward, inspired by the concept of over 100,000 ryo in their pockets. However, they were slightly discouraged by the fact that the 6 shinobi all looked to each other, and then nodded. They all began to run through seals at various speeds. Zabuza was the first to finish, releasing an enormous dragon of water. Haku was next, freezing the dragon. Anko unleashed her jutsu as the eyes finished creeping over the dragon, resulting in a similarly shaped construct, albeit it was made of fire. Naruto finished, and blew a Rankuden at it, increasing its size tenfold. Fury ran through his seals, using the rubble of their battle to create enough sand to capture all of the mercenaries. Hinata was finished at last, leaping onto the head of the ice dragon, and activating her Byakugan, and using her chakra to unconsciously form chakra strings to guide both dragons. As she leaped to the floor, they all cried out, Suihyoka Fusaten Combo, Sashoryu. Water Ice Fire Wind Sand Release Combo, Twin Rising Dragon. The mercenaries, having seen the dragons take form, turned to run, only to find themselves stuck in sand. As one, they turned to face their doom, screaming in pure, unadulterated terror. With an enormous crash, a cloud of steam covered the blast zone. Once it cleared, Gato could be found fleeing as fast as his little stubby feet could carry him. As the unconscious Hinata and Fury were picked up by Naruto, and the now revealed to be Haku, the two adult shinobi flew after him. Within seconds they had him trussed, hogtied, and hanging from one of the crossbars of the bridge. At this point, a large crowd came running over the hill only to find the 6 shinobi working on repairing the damage to the bridge. As they approached, they were surprised to see that there seemed to be at least 3 Ankos, 4 Zabuzas, one of whom took time out of carrying slabs to explain that he and Haku had no reason to continue terrorizing them, seeing as their employer had betrayed them from the start, and at least 20 Narutos, all working diligently on carving new slabs. The real Naruto could be seen talking to a Haku about both of their backstories, learning about the young Ice Shinobi. Tazuna approached the young duo, bowing deeply. What can we ever do to repay you? You chose to stay, despite the fact that your mission's danger rating was severely changed, and were even willing to help fix the bridge. It seems there is nothing left for us to give you. Now that you mention it, no, there doesn't appear to be anything. However, there is something for me to give to you, seeing as its previous owner is all tied up at the moment. Naruto said, pointing to the dangling Gato. He reached within his cloak, and withdrew a piece of paper. This is the deed to all of Gato's estate. May the team rest in pieces. Speaking of which, he snapped his fingers, and the cord holding Gato in place disappeared, causing him to fall to the ground, bouncing off of every single pipe possible on the way. He conveniently landed right in front of Inari, who pointed the crossbow he was holding at him. The former tycoon whimpered at the sight of it. The villagers began to crack their knuckles, preparing for the enormous reckoning that was headed for the wimp of a man, if that. Hey Gigi? What are we gonna call the bridge? A name, huh? How about Inokizuna? Lifeline. The villagers cried out the affirmative as the shinobi began to walk off toward their home. Naruto smiled as he turned to the villagers, shouting that Inari had better grow stronger, and be a true hero for his mom by the next time Naruto saw him. Inari smiled, and his eyes began to tear. I will Anasin. Chapter 10. Begin the exam. The grass was growing, the birds were flying, the sun was shining, and oh brother, was Naruto hurting people. He spun, preforming a horizontal axe kick, punching straight through 3 of the bodies around him. He instantly turned, barely managing to execute an uppercut, bashing through the brain of the character attempting to knife him. With another spin, the last of his attackers was thrown into a tree. With a burst of smoke, the last Kage Bunshin dispelled, leaving a very tired Naruto with a pounding headache. Ever since Nami no Kuni, he had been training, attempting to bring his body back up to speed with what it was before the warp. Over the past month, after he had vouched for Zabuza and Haku with Sarutobi, they had become Konoha Shinobi, Zabuza taking the position of a Jonin, and Haku becoming his genin apprentice. They had commonly paired up with Team 11, completing several C-rank missions, leaving both groups with at least 2 B-ranks under their belts. Hinata and Furia had both grown over the month, Hinata losing her stutter, except in extreme situations, and Furia had learned how to control his Akai Suna so well that he could pull grains out of surrounding materials. Haku had discovered that he could pull water from the surrounding air, and use it to form his ice. Naruto had discovered that while he could pull off a Baijidama, it would drain all of his yokai, leaving him unable to do much of anything for a few days, given that he had vaporized the surface of his skin, leaving him looking quite undignified. Just as he was about to form another regiment of Bunshin in order to continue his spar, Anko walked up. Oi Gaki! Think fast! She tossed him a scroll. He caught and opened it. Chunin exam, huh? Why the hell not? Haku coming with us? Yup. Since you guys are the best team in the village, the old man hoisted her on us so we can show her the ropes. Think you guys are up for it? She questioned. You really need to ask? It starts this weekend, so you better hurry up and get that paperwork done. Hearing that it contained paperwork, Naruto instantly threw it to a freshly created Bunshin like it was an explosive note. The Bunshin sighed, and immediately headed off to work on it. Naruto lay back, and began to stare at the clouds. Chunin exam again, huh? What do you guys think? He asked his resident Bijuu. This will be very entertaining. Q replied, while the rest nodded. If you guys can't figure out who Q is, then Kami help you. Naruto began to chuckle rather darkly. Sensing the confused looks from his tenants, he explained, we get another shot at Orochi team. At this, the rest of the Bijuu joined him in his chuckling. To any onlookers, the sight was truly terrifying, given that 10 different voices could be heard chuckling with malicious intent, while only one person, specifically, the demon brat of the village, was to be found. Out of wonder, what will happen when your yokai comes into contact with Gaara Shura? Since he still holds you, or rather Shikaku, in this timeline, in theory, I should assimilate my counterpart, since seeing as we came from the Alpha timeline, I pretty much take precedence. If for some reason that thing manages to take me over again, then the rest should be able to recover me easily. Let's hope it works that way. 1 week later. Wow, looks like a lot of people are here. Naruto perked up at the sound of his gentlemanly friend, turning to the young glasses-wearing swordsman. Furia was wearing a combat suit, looking rather dapper with his bow tie immaculately tied. Naruto could tell, however, that the boy was slightly intimidated. Don't worry about it, Furia-san. We will be fine, especially if we work together. Hinata said, coming up behind the duo. She was wearing the same coat as always, with a bright smile on her face. The male duo smiled, and the trio went up the stairs. They found themselves amid a crowd of genin, all of whom looked rather disappointed. Looking above the crowd, they could see a door marked 301, with 2 older genin standing in front of it. A genin in a green jumpsuit could be found on the floor next to them, while the resident Uchiha was to be seen attempting to fight the 2. Just as one of Sasuke's feet would have hit one of the 2 boys' faces, a blur was seen, before the jumpsuit-wearing genin was revealed to have caught both of the oncoming kicks. Or Lee. It's been a while. Naruto cried. Naruto-kun, my eternal rival. It has been too long. How is your youth doing? The young bushy brows replied excitedly. He and Naruto had met after Nami no Kuni, with Lee immediately challenging Naruto to a spar. Not surprisingly, they both had to be taken back to their homes unconscious by their respective sensei. They burned quite brightly, Lee. Now I do believe I just heard someone a floor above us complaining about a lack of youthful fires. Hearing this, Lee tensed, and suddenly flew upward through the ceiling, shouting about that the fires of you would burn forevermore. As those around Team 11 sweat dropped, they continued up the stairs behind a much calmer Niji and Tenten. Team 11 had met the rest of Team Guy the day after Naruto and Lee's spar. Over the month they had gotten Niji to drop his stupid fate bit for the most part, and Tenten had been teaching Furia how to better use his swords. Finally, they reached room 301 proper, having never even been bothered by the fact that there was a genjutsu on room 201. Upon entering, they found the room quite full. Behind them entered Team 7, having finally managed to get Sasuke to stop trying to beat the two obviously Chunin level shinobi. As soon as 7 entered, Ino came rushing across the room, jumping over people's heads, and even going so far as to use the light fixtures as a swing to reach them faster. Seeing her, Sasuke went bug-eyed, and immediately began to run the opposite direction, using many of the same techniques that Ino herself had just used. As they closed in on the rookie 12, they quickly stopped in order to avoid a glasses-wearing boy who had just stepped up to the others. You guys might want to cut the crap. A lot of these guys would kill you without a second thought. The glasses-wearing Leaf Nin announced, gaining the group's attention. Oh really, and who are you to talk? We're not afraid of anyone. Kiba brashly exclaimed. My name is Kabuto Yakushi, and be that as it may, you should be afraid. But seeing as you guys are all new to this, I suppose it couldn't hurt to give you all a helping hand. He trailed off. This bastard again, should I kill him? It would save us a lot of trouble. No Kit, much though we all wish you would, it would cause some rather significant changes to the timeline, most of which we can't possibly predict. Suppose you're right. Might as well get the info cards while we're here though. Now I'm going to show you guys my Nin info cards. They hold all of the data I've gathered on the other contestants. Anyone you all would like to know about? How about Gaara no Sabaku of Suna, Rock Lee and Naruto Uzumaki of the Leaf? Sasuke asked, having escaped Ino's grasp. You already know their names and villages, that's no fun. Lee, first let's see, he's done 20 C ranks, 4 B ranks, and 1 A rank. He's strongest in taijutsu, and apparently since he can't use chakra, his other stats are all at 0. Naruto Uzumaki, 15 C ranks, 3 B ranks, and AS rank? He's best in ninjutsu, followed by kenjutsu, then taijutsu. He's also the G. Kabuto was cut off by a burning sword slicing through his cards, including the one in his hand. Hey Naruto! He was helping us. Kiba yelped. No, he was about to reveal an S-rank secret that would have required all of your heads had you heard it. Besides, why should you guys have to spy on your own friends? Why not just ask me? What you have told us? No, listen up you worthless maggots. Shut the hell up, and sit the fuck down. The written exam begins now. Ibiki shouted as he and all of the other proctors appeared via Shunshin. Chapter 12, The First Exam. The First Exam. This exam consists of 10 questions. The last question will be revealed 10 minutes before the test is over. There are 3 rules that must be followed. First, and foremost, anyone who is caught cheating will be instantly disqualified along with their entire team. Second, each team member receives 10 points to start with. If you answer a question wrong, you lose a point. If any member of your team fails all of the questions, you are all disqualified. Third, if at any point I say that you have failed, you have failed. End of story. Begin. At that, the genin of the nations leaped to begin answering the questions. Within 10 seconds, at least a third of the teams had been failed for a member of the team looking at a neighbor's paper in a panic. Teams 24, 50, and 15 of Kyumo, get out of here. 17, 18, and 20 of Suna, go home. Team 13 of IWA. Team 5 of Konoha. Shikamaru sighed as he quietly formed an all too familiar seal beneath the table, extending his shadow to Choji, and began to write, answering the questions from memories. Ino smirked as she saw her teammates assume the exact same slump. She lay her head down on her arms, conveniently forming her family's seal. As her head fell to the desk, her conscience flew into the head of a certain bubblegum-haired genin. She smirked as she approached the metaphorical filing cabinet of Sakura's memories. She reached in, and pulled out a still of the test after Sakura had completed it. As soon as she had placed it in her trans-psyche briefcase, Ino turned to leave only to find the rest of Sakura's mindscape had coalesced. The room appeared to be an old-fashioned newsroom, complete with several Sakuras working on typewriters. Moving toward the door out at the far back of the room, Ino quickly leaped behind the nearest cabinet as the editor's door burst open, revealing an inverted monochrome version of Sakura. Uber Sakura began to walk down the aisle, berating several mini Sakuras for not working fast enough. Ino attempted to get through the door, only to find it had vanished. She could tell through the minimal mental link that kept her body from going brain dead that her hands had dropped and fallen apart. She was going to have to wait for them to touch before she could have any hope of returning. In the real world, another 5 teams had been thrown out, while the rookie 9 were working at a terrified pace. The time was approaching the 50-minute mark, and Ino was beginning to panic. She was still stuck in Sakura's mind, having been forced to work to avoid getting beaten by Uber Sakura. Suddenly she felt someone bum her body's arm, causing her hands connect. She leaped for the door, and just barely made it out before Uber Sakura grabbed her. Returning to her own mindscape of an enormous garden, she sighed in relief as she filed the image away in her long-term memory, and promptly returning to her body, just in time to write all of the answers down. Naruto, having looked at his paper and immediately failed to know any of the answers, blanched, seeing as no matter what he did back in the Alpha stream, he never made Chunin. However, last time Q-chan had been held back by the genjutsu placed by that Uchiha team, and the other 8 hadn't even been sealed in him. He quickly began, and was surprised at the fact that despite himself, with the aid of the other 9 Bijuu, he was finished within the first 10 minutes. He pushed away from the desk, and created a small table and a pack of cards. A tanuki, a blue cat, and a small monkey popped up in small clouds of smoke. Ibiki was rather surprised at this, and was about to fling the boy and his team out, when Naruto caught his eye, and motioned him over, the monkey already dealing him a hand. Realizing just how much time was left, Ibiki alerted the closest proctor to take over shouting duty, much though he hated to leave it, and walked over and sat down, preparing for 40 minutes of poker. 40 minutes later, Ibiki was back at the front of the room, with a significantly lighter Gamenchan. He looked around the room, noting that 50 teams were left. Listen up, you maggots. Before I announce the 10th question, there's one minor detail to be taken care of. If you fail this question, you lose all of your points, and your entire team will fail. Before the cries of indignation could rise to a dull roar, he continued. In addition, if you do take this question and fail, regardless, you won't be able to compete in another Chunin exam, for the rest of your miserable little lives. He chuckled to himself as the cries rose once more. But I took this exam 6 months ago, and they didn't stop us. Random IWA Neen number 27 cried out. Tough, I wasn't your proctor then. Now, this is the last opportunity I'm giving you to back down, and still have a chance of taking it next year. Ibiki's inner laugh turned into a maniacal laugh as another 15 teams dropped out. Only 35 teams were left, and a few more were beginning to raise their hand when the legendary blonde Gaki calmly formed and popped a Kage Bunshin rather loudly, catching everyone in the room's attention. I think we can agree that no one else is going to leave, so shall we get on with this? Or do I have to break out the embarrassing photos of that drinking party a few months back? Ibiki was modest enough that his cheeks gained the slightest red tinge, before returning to normal. With a sigh, he gathered up his ki, and unleashed it in a room-filling wave. Very well then, you all pass. No sooner had the words left his mouth, than a large bundle burst through the window, followed by 2 kunai. The kunai caught both ends of the bundle, jamming them into the ceiling. Shortly following the bundle was a dark blur, rather reminiscent of a similar day a few months back. As it flew, it flipped out, and landed on its feet, revealing it to be one shoddily dressed Enko Mitarashi. No time to relax, fuckers. It's time for the next exam. Get off your asses and get to training ground 44. With that, Enko turned to the window opposite, and promptly exited in the exact same fashion. After she left, everyone in the room, including Naruto, who knew exactly what was going to happen. Those within the room began to gather their things and leave. Training ground 44. Alright fuckers, this will be an all-out team scroll contest. Your numbers will figuratively, and most likely literally cut in half. Each team will be given either a heaven or an earth scroll. In order to pass this portion of the exam, you will need to obtain the other scroll, and reach the tower at the center of the forest. You will have 5 days to complete the exam. At 5 days? Then what are we going to do for food? An immensely distressed Choji cried. The forest is full of various plants and animals that are edible, not counting the ones that would kill you on sight no matter what. If you want to continue in this exam, you'll need to sign a liability form, which states that Konoha is in no ways responsible for any injury incurred within. Once everyone on your team has turned it in, you will receive your scroll. Now, any questions? Enko-chan? What are the odds on the Kyuubi brat making it out alive? Hearing this remark, Enko launched a kunai at Naruto, who promptly leaned his head to the side, allowing the projectile to continue unabated. There was a minor scream behind him as random Kyumo Nin number 42 got hit in the arm. Enko promptly appeared behind Naruto, rubbing her rather generous bust into his back. Not to his surprise, Naruto found he quite enjoyed the sensation. However, this joy was cut down in its prime as a slight sting was felt across his cheek, and Enko began to lick the blood away. Why is it always the good-looking ones? Funny thing, the boldest and the bravest actually tend to be cut down first. Enko suddenly stopped as she sensed the presence of someone behind her. She whirled, only to find an odd-looking Kusa Kunoichi holding her kunai in a rather absurdly long tongue. She briefly wondered both how that fit down the small girl's throat, and also it might feel down hers. Author's note, yes. Enko is a very pervy woman. Get over it. She shook the feeling away, before snatching back the kunai. Thanks, but you should be more careful. I have a nasty little tendency to rip those I don't know to shreds if they sneak up on me. Apologies, but I just thought I should return your kunai, and I never could resist the sight of blood. Whatever. Now all of you, go fill out that paperwork. As he turned to go and get the paperwork, Naruto wondered just what would happen if he killed Orochimaru right now. Alas, it would also get him thrown out of the exams, so might as well wait. Besides, seeing as Sasuke had been too busy dodging fangirls to become an Avenger, it would be quite a bit easier to help him. 20 minutes later, all teams had completed the paperwork, and were standing at the gates around the area. At last, one of the proctors set off an audio burst seal, creating a loud bang that could be heard across the village. The genin of the nations took off at an immense rate, plans flying through their heads at insane rates. Chapter 12, Snakes of a Feather Die Together. With Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke cursed the gods with all he had. It was bad enough that he had Sakura, queen of the fangirls, on his team, but he also had some no-name, Boseki Karen, and it means rotation in Japanese. Guess who's her relative, a quiet girl, with bright red hair, who had a bad habit of stalking him after training in a fashion similar to that of a certain Hyuga. Luckily, she was a censor, and as such proved to be some use, unlike the damn fangirl. To his mild surprise, however, before Karen could even find them a team to ambush, another team found them. The enemy team consisted of 3 nin, all of whom wore odd garb, and had large umbrellas attached to their backs. Sasuke assumed a fighting stance, while Sakura began to retreat, trembling horribly. Again to his surprise, however, Karen did not in fact back down, but began to go through a series of seals that he had never seen before. He cursed the fact that he still didn't have his Sharingan yet, and as such was forced to sit back and watch in interest along with the nin. Having finished by running through Hibitora, she inhaled deeply, before blowing out a stream of flames as dark as the night. Yami no Hano, her Kekkai Genkai allowed her to utilize flames that were almost on the same level as the great goddess Amaterasu herself. The flames were so powerful, they burned through even light, and didn't stop burning until all in their path was destroyed. The nin were lucky enough that they were all rather quick, for if even an ember had hit them, they would have burned until oblivion. The biggest downside though was that due to the destructive nature of the flames, the only time as she could practice the techniques were in direct and Mortal Kombat, hence why the others on her team had never seen them, and why she could only use it once at the moment. In comparison, the flames of the technique, Amaterasu, were so weak, they could be seen as a mere ember. Sasuke found himself rather rapidly reassessing the value of young Boseki Karen. If she could use flames such as those on a regular basis, she may be even stronger than himself. He quickly realized that Sakura, while seemingly at least a little stronger than Karen, was actually the true dobe of their class. Naruto had changed, and even Shikamaru and that Hyuga girl had gotten off their respective asses and gotten some training done. Sakura had done nothing but diet and tried to look pretty for her Sasuke-kun. As he shuddered at the thought, he noted that Karen might actually be someone he could relate to. From what he had gathered, she was an orphan, alone in life. After most of the Uchiha clan had been assassinated by his own brother, whom had gone on to explain that those who were killed were part of a coup d'état attempt against the village, including his own father. However, he had spared those who were not involved, which happened to be the other half of the clan that the Shinobi half never really talked about, and that he had been completely unaware of until the massacre. He had gradually grown to like that half, favoring them over those among the Shinobi portion that still lived, sans his mother and his brother. Sakura was both shocked and enraged that her precious Sasuke-kun could be so deceived by that red-haired bitch. To think that someone would ever try to claim what was rightfully hers, and hers alone, was outrageous. However, the show of power also put a bit of a shock in her. Who would have thought that someone so little could be so powerful? She was horribly outclassed, but then again, she reminded herself, the stupid bitch had shoulder-length hair, and everyone knew that Sasuke liked girls with long hair. She put those thoughts at the back of her mind as she turned her attention back to the fight in front of her. With Team 8, Inuzuka Kiba was having a bad day. To begin with, they had that stupid written test, and now, there were these thrice-damned Kirinin trying to beat them. In a twist of irony, Kiba was out of energy, while the Aburame twins, Shino and Shizuka, and, female name meaning quiet, were holding the three off as Akamaru attempted to hit them with a Gotsuga. The 3 Kirinin wore beige jumpsuits, differentiated only by their face mask, which consisted of goggles and a rebreather. Said Kirinin had an annoying habit of traveling underground while their Mizu Bunshin held off the enemy. At last they had made it through the remaining Mizu Bunshin, when the 3 originals popped out of the ground in an attempt to surprise the Konoha Genin. A pity that the Aburame had tagged them with some tracker insects, and planned ahead. The end result was rather gruesome as the 3 moronic Kirinin were blown to smithereens. Their scroll was luckily retrieved by the Aburame prior to the explosion. Wiping off some bakabits, Kiba sighed. The silent duo were actually seemed more efficient at killing enemies than the Shinigami herself. With Team 10, Yamanaka Ino had one complaint about the forest. It didn't have enough flowers. She meant no offense to whoever had originally seeded the area, but if you have an enormous forest-type ecosystem, it needs flowers to survive. Of course, given how many of the plants in the area seemed to be of the flesh-eating variety, she supposed that it might not actually. After reflecting on this, she realized that the vines she was caught in had loosened enough for her to leap to the ground, conveniently next to her 2 teammates. They had been knocked out by the same vines that had caught her, along with a team of Kusanin that had tried to attack them. She briefly wondered why, before shoving that thought to the back of her head as she collected the enemy Nin's scroll and began to revive her teammates. With Team 11, for Naruto, Hinata, and Furyu, the day had gone quite well. They all had finished the first exam with ease, and the second exam proved to be rather lacking compared to what Enko had put them through within the selfsame jungle they were currently in. Of course, given how powerful they had become, there were no problems from the local flora and fauna, due to a severe trimming they had given one of the vines that had attempted to capture them. Naruto had an array of Kage Bunshin in the surrounding area, keeping an eye out for the other teams. He had also used a modified Kuchios, summoning for those idiots among us, to release the Bijuu in their chibi animal forms. For an idea of how they look, imagine the Bijuu's animal form, but anthropomorphic, and the size of a large cat. He sent Shura to find Gaara, and make sure he stayed alive, while he had San, and sure to go protect teams 7, 8, and 10 respectively. Gobi-san, Goku, and Sachi had spread out with the Bunshin to help cover more ground, while Hachi and Q remained with the main party, mostly for conversation. So, if you're 2 of the Bijuu, shouldn't you be the size of mountains? Or at least large houses? Hinata wondered aloud. Kit, if there's one thing anyone with a good knowledge of history should know, it's that the Bijuu have, several times, vanished for generations. We typically just transform into a human form, live out a lifetime, and then eventually fake our death. It's actually quite satisfying. Of course, failing that, we tend to take a smaller version of our animal form, and live among our species for a while. So, did you ever take the form of a shinobi Q-san? Once long ago. I was known as the Kami no Akai Yuzu, Red Maelstrom of God. Given how that life turned out, I may have accidentally started the Uzumaki clan. Naruto chuckled a little at that. An odd thought went through his head as he realized that he technically was both the successor and the progenitor of his mother's clan. This thought quickly went out of his head as Naya appeared next to them. Team 7 is under attack by Orochi team, Naya. We need to go now. She turned, and quickly took off, Team 11, and Bijuu following. On arrival, they discovered Sakura unconscious in a crater on a tree, Karen barely managing to stand, with several cuts on her body, and Sasuke standing in terror as Orochimaru's head stretched toward him. A pity it never reached its target, as a glowing green blade in the form of a claw sliced through the neck. Orochimaru's head fell to the ground with a groan, before glaring at his body that was now bumbling about. Over here, you idiot! Jigus, if I knew you were going to be this stupid again, I would have grown a brain for you. At long last, the body found its head, picking it up and holding it at chest height. So, the QB brat HM? This should be interesting. Kuchios no Jutsu. With that, the body and brains of Erohibi flew up as an enormous snake grew from beneath them. With a hiss of disapproval, Manda the Great turned to Orokibaka. Now then. Since I have you here, I must ask. Where in the 9 hells are my sacrifices? Now, Manda-kun. The boy there is the QB brat I was telling you about. Wouldn't you love to eat him, and all of his most certainly delicious kakra? No. Now then, as per our agreement, Section 27b, Article 46 Line 7, if the summoner in question fails to deliver a quantity of sacrifices being no less in number than 100, the summoner shall have their body devoured by the summonee. One loud chomp later, the body of Erohibi was within Manda, slowly being devoured, as the head flew toward the forest floor. Naruto merely held out a hand glowing with yokai, the head landing lightly within. The yokai quickly cauterized the wound, disabling any regeneration ability the Baka no Atama, idiot head, might have been preparing. He quickly flipped the head over, rapidly expelling yokai from his pointer finger, as he engraved a seal on the metal plate that had materialized to cover neck, forming what looked like a socket. With his other hand, he formed a small transparent sphere around Orochiatama, quickly connecting the socket to the sphere. With that, he formed a Bijuu Bunshin with some excess yokai, and sent Orochiatama off to Anko-chan. He got the strangest feeling she would get a kick out of it. That or she would kick it, but that was Baka no Orochiatama's problem now. Sasuke just sat there. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. First off, a bizarre Kusanine had attacked them, and then revealed herself to actually be Orochimaru of the Sannin, releasing a metric aston of killing intent. Orochimaru had been stretching his head toward him, when Naruto had suddenly appeared, and promptly helped vaporize him, without even a second thought. He was shocked at just how powerful Naruto had become. And his teammates hadn't even flinched at the sight of that enormous snake. To his further shock, said snake reached down to examine Naruto. So, you are the one known on the summons plains as the one who has lived before. With your permission, I would have you sign the Hibi contract. With that, another snake appeared, wrapped around a large scroll. I also ask, on behalf of the other summons, that your acquaintances, Hyuga, and Usagi alike sign a contract. The Lapin have already staked a claim for Usagi, as have the Washi for the Hyuga heiress. With that, a large top hat appeared in midair, from which a large, white rabbit flew, holding a small scroll, while an eagle the size of a person flew out of nowhere to land next to Hinata, with a scroll strapped across its back. The Uber trio quickly signed the contracts, which were collected by their respective summons, and returned to the plains. Now I take my leave of you. Good luck in the future, and be sure to summon the bosses of your contracts after this is all over. Naruto-kun, I hope to see you again, and don't worry about the sacrifice shenanigan. We only had that for Orochiatama in order to attempt to kill him. He used us much too expendably, and as such Anko Mitarashi was made the primary summoner. We would only allow various weaker Hibi to be summoned by him, more of as a form of training. Now that you have signed the contract, I hereby pronounce you the primary, and leave this scroll to enable you to induct new summoners. With that, a scroll not unlike the one Jiraiya wore, except that the colors were purple and gold, with pure sapphire end caps. Naruto quickly picked it up and strapped it on. Manda promptly poofed away, leaving Sasuke to fall into blissful unconsciousness. With a sigh, Naruto went through the seals for Kuchiyos, calling in a snake the size of a large wolf to carry Team 7 to the tower. As Team 11 began their trip to take out excess teams, in order to gain a scroll for themselves, and 2 for Team 7, one to replace the one Orochimaru destroyed, and another to allow them to finish on Naruto's insistence, having learned in Alpha that Karen was an Uzumaki. He also had them do it because Sasuke wasn't a bigoted bastard this time. 1 hour later, at long last, Team 7 arrived at the tower, having taken out a grand total of 21 teams. They arrived about 5 minutes prior to the Suna trio, and having solved the riddle, left Team 7 outside the building with the necessary scrolls under a concealment seal, went off to their separate rooms within the tower, and fell asleep, the Bijuu using cots that Naruto had materialized. They slept and dreamed, although admittedly Q and Ni both snuck into Naruto's bed to cuddle up to him. Chapter 13. Go, fight! 5 days passed, and 7 other teams managed to make it to the tower. Among them were Team 7, having woken up next to the scrolls a day after being dropped there, Team 8, having finally wiped the blood off themselves, and Team 10, having successfully avoided the vines that continued to plague both Choji and Shikamaru. The Suna trio naturally made it through, without a scratch, as did Kabuto's team. Team Guy made it through, but not before Lee attempted to challenge an enormous panther to a fight. The poor thing never stood a chance. Also among their numbers were the team from Oto, and a team from Kumo. Team 7 had spent most of their time getting to know the other teams, including the one from Kumo, seeing as they weren't there in Alpha. The Oto team was surprisingly quite nice, seeing as Naruto had told them of Orochimaru's predicament. Those among the rookies were also surprised at the fact that Naruto had managed to take down one of the Sannin. The team from Kumo, having never really heard of the Sannin's reputation, were a bit lacking in both surprise and respect. The team consisted of 2 men, and 1 kunoichi. The guys were called Monkey D, Luffy, and Rono Zoro, and the kunoichi was known only as Nami. Luffy wore a pair of jeans, a red vest, and a straw hat with a red band, while Zoro wore a pair of black pants, with a green and black belt, with 3 swords attached. Nami wore blue striped white shirt, along with a pair of orange shorts, and had 3 blue poles attached to her leg. At long last, it was the end of the 5th day, and an announcement was given to travel to the arena in the center of the tower. The Bijuu and Team 7 gathered up their things, before the lower 9 dispelled, leaving Naruto, Hinata, and Fury to proceed to the arena. Upon arrival, they found to their surprise the Jonin population of Konoha, and the Hokage himself, awaiting them. Before any questions could be asked by the assembled genin, a sickly-looking Jonin stepped forward. Before you all wonder why you're here, let me, he paused as he coughed viciously. Allow me to explain. My name is Gecko Hate, and I will be the proctor for the 3rd portion of the exam. However, before we can hold the 3rd exam itself, we must hold the preliminary. Unfortunately, there are too many of you to advance, so we will hold a KOF 1-on-1 set of battles, randomly selected by the screen behind me. Whoever is left afterwards will receive a free pass to the finals. Now, KOF, let the preliminaries begin. With that, the screen began flipping through the names available, finally landing on Choji and Dosu. The match went just as it had the first time, Choji using his Nikuden Shusha, human boulder, and attempting to bash Dosu with it. Dosu had dodged, and launched an attack with his bracer to flood Choji's form with sound waves. The result was he was knocked out due to the amplifying effect of the water in his body. As the medics carried his sleeping form away, the screen began to go through names again. Finally, it landed on Ino and Sakura. Once they had both arrived at the arena, Hate gave the signal, and the epic fight began. Once Hate had given the signal, Ino reacted immediately by preforming a backflip to gain some distance, launching several kunai using the rotational energy of her spin to slingshot them even faster than normal. It was all Sakura could do to flee as the projectiles came hurtling at her. She responded in kind with a barrage of shuriken, most of which were underpowered, and couldn't have hurt Ino even if they had come close to hitting her. Once she reached the back wall of the arena, Ino began to run through hand signs, finally landing on her favorite. Her consciousness flew from her body, latching on to Sakura's body. Before Hate could even attempt to call the match, Ino forced Sakura to raise her hand, and announced that she forfeit. Having done so, Ino leaped back into her body, standing up to the applause of the crowd. All in all, the match had taken no more than 5 minutes. Once more, the names began to spin. Kankuro was prepared to fight just about anyone, but seeing his name come up against his brother's caused him to forfeit without a second thought. If he had to face him, he would be royally fucked. With a cry of anger from the watching crowd, the names again picked up speed. Kabuto chuckled to himself when he found himself up against the Hyuga heiress. From what he had heard, she was one of the weakest here, and he was quite prepared to take her out, just to spite the QB brat. As he leaped down to the arena, he was surprised to find her already there, the effects of a pure chakra Shunshin just beginning to fade away. The fact that a genin could Shunshin in the first place was bizarre, but the fact that she could do it with pure chakra, which produced an effect similar to a portal, was insane. Despite his growing doubts about the match, Kabuto quickly took up his stance. Once the proctor had given the shout of Hajime, he leaped at the girl, chakra scalpels ablaze, only to be thrown back by the force of a single strike. He growled, before launching an onslaught of kunai, hiding himself behind them, as he raced forward, intent on cutting at least one fatal artery. To his surprise again, she began to run through hand signs, landing on Torinu. She braced herself, before launching forward with a battle cry. As the first shuriken neared her, Hinata merely tapped it, before rapidly leaping away as a net of right-un chakra spread throughout the kunai as they impacted the wall behind her. As it completed, all she said was 6 words. Right-un, Kaminari Megami, Kenden no Nami. Lightning Goddess, electrocution wave, for those of you without access to Google Translate. Suddenly, the net of electricity leaped from the kunai, forming a wave of pure lightning, which filled the arena, barely missing Hinata, and blowing Kabuto through a wall. After a few minutes of silence, the Jonin burst out in applause, as Naruto leaped down to give his teammate a kiss. To all those present's shock, Hinata sat there dazed for a moment, before turning to the blonde boy in front of her and returning an even deeper kiss. Those present from the Inuzuka clan let off a round of whistles as the now-initiated duo blushed. Naruto took Hinata's hand, and preformed a futon shunshin back to the rest of the genin. He was met with a round of applause as those present congratulated the pair. In the background, Kurenai could be seen forking over several ryo to Enko, the result of a rather unfortunate bet. Once everyone had given Naruto their praise, the screen began to flash again. Sasuke and Yoroi went down to enact their fight, which unfortunately for Yoroi ended exactly as it had originally. The same happened in the next fight, which consisted of Shino against Zaku, except Shino had unplugged his arms with at the last second, having gotten Zaku to give up after an uncomfortable amount of pressure was present. Temari vs Tenten went as expected, unless you count a Kenjutsu vs Ninjutsu fight different from what had happened. Despite going to close range, Tenten still lost the fight due to the immense weight of the fan. However, the fight was over before any serious damage could occur. At long last, the reels landed on a fight that should never have happened. Zoro vs Furyu. As both arrived in the arena, the swordsmen nodded to each other before taking their respective stances. Furyu had taken the time to put on his combat suit, which literally consisted of a suit reinforced with steel fibers. The black suit was matched by the white shirt, red tie, and black glasses he wore. Once the match began, both went for their swords. Before anyone could even blink, both were where the other had started, swords just barely out of the sheath. As one, they finished the motion with a resounding clink, before both disappeared in clouds of blood. Once the mist cleared, all that could be seen were the two both lying motionless on the ground. Luffy and Naruto both leaped to their friends, Naruto already running through hand signs along with a bunshin. The two Narutos landed next to each of the combatants, hands glowing green, before they plunged their hands into the swordsmen's chests in unison. All that could be seen was a green glow resonating within the two's chests, before they both began to cough and slowly sit up. Both Luffy and Naruto gave a sigh of relief, for if either had lost their friend, they would most likely have gone on a rampage, vaporizing Konoha. As the medics took the begrudging swordsmen, now allies in strength and respect for the other, the reels spun once more. The next fight was Nami vs Kin. The two kunoichi leapt to the arena, before nodding to each other in respect, before taking their stances. As the fight began, Nami pulled up the poles on her leg, connected them, and spun it around, inciting blue and red bubbles to form, slowly generating an immense black cloud above the arena. Before Kin could even throw a saban, Nami put the poles away, and leapt back. Right-un, Tenki no Ato, Sandabora de Tenpo. She cried as she launched a yellow bubble into the cloud, causing an enormous lightning bolt to form, striking Kin, and forcing her into unconsciousness. As those present stood in shock, the board again chose two names. Luffy and Lee. The horror. The two leapt to the arena, both prepared for an interesting fight. As Hate announced the match, and leapt to what he hoped was a safe distance, given what had occurred, the two flew at each other. The combatants traded blows for a period, before leaping away, Luffy to the top of the statue, and Lee to the other end of the arena. Nami/Guy-sensei? Can I go all out? This guy's strong. They called out to their respective semi-sane persons. The two chuckled before they nodded. The two fighters smirked, before Luffy tossed his hat to Nami, and Lee took off his weights. Their smirks grew as both disappeared. They continued to appear, and then disappear throughout the arena, trading a flurry of blows, and then separating. Their speed increased as the two were barely visible, even to the Hokage. Finally, both landed where they had before, and once more asked if they could go even further, so long as they promised not to destroy the entire building. Their smirks grew to full-blown grins, as Luffy blew air into his arm, and Lee went through two of the gates. The air in Luffy's arm shot down to his legs, super pumping the blood in his body, as both of their skin turned a bright red. The two disappeared completely as shockwaves shocked the air, for a good 10 minutes, before both landed in front of each other, in the center of the arena. Each had a fist in the other's face, and before anyone could do anything, both fell backward unconscious, their skin returning to normal. After the chuckles at the fact that another round had ended in a tie, and after such an amazing battle, the screen began the choosing process. Finally, it landed on Aburain Shizuka and Tsurugu Misumi. Misumi leapt to the arena as Shizuka burst into a cloud of insects, reforming on the ground. Heh. Prepare to die, Baka Megain. Idiot glasses, I'm afraid it's time for you to retire. Why? Because no one gets away with insulting my glasses. No one. With that, Shizuka burst into a cloud again, forming an immense cloud in front of Misumi. Being the idiot he was, Misumi assumed that she was still within the cloud, as he stretched his limbs deep inside. Imagine his surprise when he found a source of great pain, and retracted his arms, only to find two stumps where his hands should have been, and a thin layer of purple rapidly spreading across his skin. Once it had completely covered him, restricting his movement, excluding his face, Shizuka gave him one chance to surrender. The idiot refused. Nano Kikechu, Muchu o Kanryo, nano parasitic insects, complete devouring, she said, barely above a whisper, as the insects spread across his face, covering him completely. Once that was done, the insects at his extreme ties began to fly away, leaving nothing but dust, until all had rejoined the hole, shown by Shizuka's coat collar being slowly reconstructed, before the rest of her head, and her glasses at the same time, reformed. A moment passed before applause broke the silence, slowly growing to a dull roar. The reels landed on Karen and Niji, however Karen gave up, being quite knowledgeable about just how badly she would have lost. For the last time, the reels chose, and they chose well. Naruto versus Kiba. Let the battle commence. Kiba realized almost, not quite, but almost, just how badly he was screwed. For what he didn't know was that Naruto had decided that now was the perfect time to test the Baijigen's limits, seeing as there was a time limit of 20 minutes, which meant he couldn't have it on for too long. He used a futon shunshin to reach the floor, arriving just as Kiba landed. Once poor, beat-up Hate began the match, and leapt to the Hokage's box for safety. Naruto activated his dojutsu, and flipped backward. The Baijigen did indeed grant him a vision similar to the Byakugan, a fact which he was able to attest to now, having gained it through the kiss with Hinata. No, it does not require a kiss. Any DNA will do. And or blood. I'm yelling. However, it improved on that by showing the entire cardiovascular system, all those little arteries and veins, while still seeming to be transparent. Those present gasped at the sight of Naruto's pupil lengthening, and at his irises taking a golden color, thanks to the use of Shura's yokai. He was surprised at the fact that after looking over Kiba with it, he felt as if he instinctively knew his stance, and rapidly adopted it as well. To the poor Inuzuka's surprise, Kiba growled at the fact that Naruto was apparently mocking him, and tossed a soldier pill to Akamaru, looking to end the fight quickly. Gijin Ninpo, Jijin Bunshin, Shiaka no Jutsu. Imitation Beast Shinobi Art, Beast Human Clone, 4 legs Jutsu. With that, Akamaru transformed into a perfect Bunshin of Kiba, while both became more animalistic. The two began to race toward Naruto as he chuckled. Gijin Ninpo, Gutsuga. Imitation Beast Shinobi Art, Fong passing Fong, as you all should know. The duo began to spin at an immense rate as the air around them seemed to spiral with them, forming into an elongated, pointy, teardrop. Naruto's smirk grew even wider as he realized the Baijigen allowed him to copy any move, including those restricted by Kekkei Genkai. He briefly wondered what would happen with Gaara, and the other Bijuu skills, and if he gained the entire bloodline, or just the technique. However, just prior to Kiba and Akamaru hitting him, he laughed aloud. Kuchios no Jutsu, Okina Hibi no Kabe. Summoning Jutsu, Great Snake Wall. An immense puff of smoke appeared, before what looked like a writhing wall of snakes appeared before Naruto. In their surprise, Kiba and Akamaru couldn't stop in time, and found themselves receiving hundreds of small bites from the various snakes that made up the wall. Once they finally got away, Kiba found himself growling even louder at the fact that his most powerful move was blocked so simply. He nodded to Akamaru as he pulled out a smoke bomb. The smoke rapidly filled the room, obscuring the combatants from regular vision. The Hyuga present activated their Byakugan, intent on describing the fight to those around them. To their surprise, what seemed to be a snake the size of a large wolf was next to Naruto, and what happened next was even more surprising. Hibi Ninpo, Nijen no Hachuri Kuran, Inshodakina Hibi. Snake Shinobi Art, Human Reptile Clone, Striking Snake. Both Naruto and the snake disappeared into a cloud of dense, chakra-filled smoke, before emerging. They looked identical, and the look was a strange one. They looked like the love child of Naruto and Orochimaru, but at the same time, completely different. Naruto had grown taller, his hair had elongated, and he had grown the equivalent of fangs within his mouth. His clothes had changed as well, becoming his cloak, which now had purple highlights, a pair of black shinobi pants, a deep gold shirt, and deep purple vambraces and greaves. Vambraces are arm bracers, greaves are leg bracers. If one looked closely, they could see a long, dark gold tail emerging from the back of the cloak. The Narutos stepped forward, nodded to each other, and threw off the cloaks, both landing on the rim of the arena. They grew identical smirks before running through a few hand seals, ending in Usagi Hibi. Futon de Tapa. The smoke filling the arena flew away, revealing the combatants exactly where they were. The smoke had been in place only 20 seconds. Their smirks grew again, as the two raced toward the one they could smell was Kiba. The poor bum was so surprised that he could only stand there stunned. One appeared behind him, and launched him high in the air, while the other appeared and began to beat the living crap out of Kiba, before both phased into existence above him, and promptly drop-kicked him to the floor. Hibi no Gaijutsu, Giga Sunakubarika. Snake Art, Giga Snake Breaker. Can you tell I've been watching Gurren Lagann? The resulting dust cloud filled the arena, and upon clearing, showed the expected result. Kiba, out cold next to a whimpering Akamaru, within a several-foot-deep crater. The shock of it all, despite the insanity of the previous matches, was enough to keep everyone present quiet for a moment, before bursting out in the largest round of applause seen yet. Naruto chuckled as he walked off, leaving Kiba to the medic team. They hadn't seen anything yet. Chapter 14. Author's note: before we begin, I just want to say I recently realized I've been spelling Shichibi Sachibi, and Jiraiya. I plan on eventually going back when I edit earlier chapters for spelling and grammar, and changing this, but for now keep in mind Shichibi is the same as Sachibi, while Jiraiya is Jiraiya. I also apologize for the fact that this is over 2 months late. Return of an old friend. Those of you who passed have 1 month to prepare for the finals. They will be held at the arena for all to see. This will also be when various dignitaries are introduced to the strength of this generation shinobi, and as such we ask that all of you do your best. These fights will not only determine who among your number are able to become Chunin, but also which villages are the strongest in the eyes of the dignitaries, showcasing who would best serve their purposes. If you would all come forward and retrieve a number from the box, we will determine the order of initial combat for the tournament. 11. Shikamaru said with a yawn. 3. Shino said briskly. 9. Said the bored Uchiha. 5. Temari muttered. 1. Dosa lamented. 4. Wonder who I'm up against. Naruto pondered. 8. Gaara intoned. 2. Hinata said with a small smile. 10. Nami smirked. 6. May Kami have mercy on my enemy soul. Shizuka said, shocking those that hurt her. 7. May fate choose well. Niji said to the ire of his friends. Very well. The first round of fights will be as such: Kinuta Dosu and Naro Shikamaru, Aburaim Shizuka and Hyuga Niji, Hyuga Hinata and Inazuma no Nami, Aburaim Shino and Uchiha Sasuke, and Sabaka no Gaara and Uzumaki Naruto. Sabaka no Temari will face the winner of the second fight. I hope to see you all welcome next month. Naruto chuckled at the memory of Shikamaru's face when he realized he would actually have to work for his win. It had only been a day, but already the contestants could be seen at various training grounds, working to the limit of their abilities. Naruto himself had spent the last 24 hours searching for Jiraiya, in order to convince the old lecher to train him for a month. When he thought about it, he realized that he'd have to explain his story again. This was getting repetitive. Naruto-san, you might not actually have to tell him. From what my research has told me, if you preform a jutsu you couldn't possibly know in this timeline in his face, such as the Rasengan, his passed on soul from the previous timeline may latch onto him, merging the two. This phenomenon is what's known as creating a cascading death, using the force of a universe to power another. In this timeline, it would seem an immense one is already in place, thanks to your soul traveling. Given that a cascading death, even a small one, could go immensely wrong, to the point of destroying an entire multiverse, it would appear you are destined for much more than was originally thought. If whole universes are being used to help supplement this universe, your destiny may not stop at becoming the Juubi. It may encapsulate perhaps even godhood. Koko, the Gobi said. So the Alpha universe in this timeline is gone? Completely? Not quite yet. A few portions of it remain, all apparently inhabited by a blue police telephone box. I am afraid I do not quite know why it is there, but there it is. Well, whatever you found, I suppose it doesn't much matter now. Besides, it's about time I went and got Erosenin. With that, Naruto leapt out his window, intent on finding the pervy sage. Unfortunately, Jiraiya was nowhere to be found, not at any of the normal hot springs. Even after searching the entire village with Kage Bunshin, he had yet to find him. As much as he hated to admit it, the old perv was good. Very good. Although that did admittedly explain why he didn't hear screams of pain and womanly righteousness almost every day. However, just as he was on his way back to his apartment, he heard the quiet giggling that so well marked the arrival of the perviest of Sannin. To Naruto's immediate left was a sight for sore eyes: Jiraiya sitting next to a hot springs fence, hands ablur, and mouth giggling. Erogigi. What ya doing? He asked loudly in a fashion laced with such innocence that it could only be accomplished by a young child. Jiraiya jumped at the noise before turning to him. The strongest of the Sannin was given a shock as soon as he saw the young boy who had accosted him. And Minato? No, that can't be. I saw him die. So that means this brat's his oh shit. Who are you calling a mere perv? For I am not just a pervert, but a super pervert. Yeah, Erogigi. So, what are you doing next to a woman's bath? I'm doing research for my book. Now what do you want? I'm busy. Jiraiya retorted, while panicking, trying to figure out a way to avoid the kid's suspicion. In all seriousness, can you train me for the Chunin exams? I only have a month to get stronger. Only if you can get a punch on me, brat. And I warn you, I'm pretty fast, so I doubt you'll land one. Who said I was going to land it? There's an old pervert out here! Naruto yelled, knocking Jiraiya out of his small tree, and into the bath across the fence. One scream of womanly righteousness, and a good strong kick to the crotch later, Jiraiya came flying out of the bath, screaming at Naruto to meet him at Training Ground 16. Training Ground 16, several hours later. Well, if I'm to train you, I suppose I need to know what you can do. So hit me with the strongest thing you've got. Nah, I like the Kage Mountain where it is, thanks. Oh? And what makes you think you have any chance of moving, or destroying it? Jiraiya smirked, only to become a little scared as Naruto's smirk got even bigger. Just the fact that I've got the 9 Bijuu sealed in me, the fact that I'm gradually becoming the Juubi, the fact that I can use any Kekkai Genkai that I can get the DNA of, and the fact that this both isn't my home universe, or my home timeline. Anything I missed? He nonchalantly asked the 9 as they appeared around him. How is that even possible? Jiraiya cried. I know for a fact that the Nibi and the Hachibi are sealed in Kumo, and that the Ichibi is sealed in that kid Gaara. Did you not hear the part about not my universe, not my timeline? In theory, if the chakra from one of my Bijuu hits one of this universe's Jinchuriki, then the counterpart in my head takes over this universe's power, leaving me with their original power. Once this is all over, I should have something along the lines of 55 tails available to me, each set with its own attributes. For instance, at this, he reformed the board and wave idea from Nami. I can use Shura's, or as you would know her seal, Shikaku, yokai to control the sands. For every set of tails I unlock, I gain one of mine. Once Shura is in control of this universe's version, or as we've taken to calling them, her beta, I'll unlock Ni's tails. And once I get a Bijuu to where they need to go, one of their tails manifests upon me, granting me a trait from them as well. Huh. And you plan to do what with all this power? Probably? Bring world peace, then try and see if I can hop about the multiverse. There's got to be a reason why I was given a second chance. Want to join me? After managing to throw off his incredulous look, Jiraiya shrugged. Why the hell not? Any idea how I might go about seeing if I can get my memory of Alpha back? Just a moment Naruto tossed the seemingly innocent shuriken, before disappearing in a purple flash, promptly returning with the shuriken in hand. Hiraishin? But that's impossible, not even I could figure it. Jiraiya trailed off, before he was enveloped in a burst of light. Gaki, looks like you finally managed it. Let's go get some sake and tell Tsunade. Ero Senin. Wait a minute. Remember what your beta remembered. It's about a month too early for that. Damn it, I wanted to see Tsunaheim. Bah, I guess we'll have to get her sometime this month. So, seeing as you are obviously more than powerful enough to take care of Gaara, I guess I need to figure out what the hell to teach you. Mind helping me plan world domination? Sure, why the hell not? Just so long as you pay for the booze. Several hours, and bottles of booze later, kid, the old man hiccuped. You know I Lervishia, yeesh? Go home, Jiraiya, you're drunk. At that very instant, across the omniverse, several prominent figures wearing long scarves, bow ties, and fezes, sneezed uncontrollably for about a minute. 2 weeks and one ridiculous bet later. Gaki, how in the 9 hells did you win that bet? The odds were 1,000,000 to 1, cried an irked Tsunade as Shizen and herself were escorted back to Konoha by Team 11, along with Jiraiya. Haim, you of all people should remember the luck his father had. Why you took that bet I'll never know. But on that note, Naruto, if you would? Naruto nodded at that, promptly forming a Fuma shuriken roughly half the ordinary size, and launched it, disappearing, and reappearing in midair as the shuriken dissipated. Tsunade was enveloped in a flash of light, prior to falling unconscious from information overload. Before Shizen could react in shock, she too was enveloped, and fell unconscious, being caught along with her sensei by Jiraiya and Naruto before they could hit the ground. Hinata and Furia merely chuckled and continued on as a Kage Bunshin hinged into a cart for Jiraiya to carry the sleeping forms with. Day of the tournament. The contestants stood ready in the arena, having spent the last month doing their very best to train and prepare for the upcoming event. The Hyuga prodigies stood ready, as did the Aburaim twins. Dosa was to be found sharpening a kunai, while Nami could be seen chatting with Shikamaru. Gaara stood slightly apart from the rest of the group, exuding an air of murderous intent. Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Within the Kage box were the Kages of every nation, and their guards, consisting of the Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi, with Jiraiya and Tsunade acting as guards, the Reikage, with Karabi and Yujito Ni behind him, the Mizuki Jigura, with Meitorumi and Ao standing guard, the Tsuchika Jinoki with 2 generic IWA Jonin, and the Kazakage Shigeru with his own pair of bulk by Jonin holding position. Ladies and gentlemen, lords and ladies, Kage of various genders, welcome to the 28th biannual Chunin exams. I am the announcer for this exam, Yana Otoko, and here are our contestants. The first match will be between Kinyuta Dosu of Oto, and Nara Shikamaru of Konoha. Hey Jaime! As the rest of the contestants leapt from the field, Shikamaru and Dosu bowed their heads to each other, before leaping back. The match began with Dosu attempting to get close enough for his sound waves to be effective, while Shikamaru tried to keep his distance. After a while, Shikamaru began an offensive, pummeling Dosu with shuriken until the Oto Nin was within range of his shadow. Kage main no jutsu complete. Now Dosu, as good a friend though you are now, I'm afraid you need to surrender, or else I'll be forced to knock you out. Not likely, Shikamaru. I learned a few tricks over the last month. Kindan no Oto, Hankyo undo, forbidden sound, reverberating movement. With that, Dosu's body appeared to ripple into nothing, before appearing on the other side of the arena. What did you just do? I have an IQ of over 200, and even I have no idea how you just did that. The Hankyo undo is a forbidden jutsu that I created, and by using the sound waves created by merely announcing the technique, it transmits my body to wherever they first rebound. In short, it enables me to escape no matter what happens, so long as I have enough chakra. An interesting technique, given that sound waves are incorporeal. What would happen if I were to reply to the frequency with an exact replica of it? It would cancel the wave, but what of you? With luck I never have to find out. Now, shall we continue? Dosu questioned as he flew at Shikamaru, first with a wave of shuriken, then with several sound waves. Shikamaru deflected the projectiles, but was hit with the waves. As he stumbled, Dosu caught him with his bracer, and whispered, I apologize for this, Shikamaru-san, but I have important information for you. There is an invasion coming, one with the force to wipe out all of Hai no Kuni. The Hokage, Orochimaru-sama, has been preparing for all-out war against the enemy, prior to his disappearance in the second exam. My team and myself have been chosen to take part in the defense, however, and are prepared to fight for Konoha. Once I allow you to fall, please knock me unconscious. My teammate Kin has a jutsu that will successfully wake me. All I ask is that you make it look good, and that you inform your Kage as soon as you can. Shikamaru nodded, already processing this information. Go. Dosu leapt back, before finding himself caught in another cage main. To his surprise, this was different, as the shadows grew around his body. Finally, they reached his head, forming a needle behind his neck, and jabbed him in a pressure point. Well, there you have it, folks, the winner of the first round, Nara Shikamaru. Shikamaru walked off to applause, as the med team took Dosu to the hospital. Once Shikamaru was within the waiting rooms, he preformed a seal that would call especially a Sainambu, in this case Shikamaru's bodyguard, or defensive agent, as the man preferred to be called. Hyo, listen well. I have information the Hokage needs to hear. In the arena. And now, the second match of the day. Aburame Shizuka versus Hyuga Niji. May the best clan win. Heijime. Shizuka and Niji faced off, bowing to each other, before assuming their respective stances, Shizuka with her hands in her coat, and Niji with his hands at the ready. After a short stare-off, in which neither party blinked, the two began to throw blows back and forth. Niji would attempt a Juuken stirk, which Shizuka would deform around, or Shizuka would send a few Kikeichu, only for them to be destroyed by a Juuken strike. Once the two realized they were at a stalemate, they stopped for a moment, before a small clink was heard, and the two flew at each other, weapons in hand. Shizuka attacked with a pair of Kama, while Niji fought back with a pair of Sai. The two continued to clash, before Shizuka managed to hook Niji's Sai away from him, leaving the poor Hyuga defenseless. Two clouds appeared beside her, each in possession of a Sai, as the Aburame advanced rapidly. Niji was forced to rapidly defend against 4 separate attacks, until at last, it became too much. Kaiten! Shizuka was forced back, the Kikeichu wielding the Sai dispersing. As she rose to her feet, Niji smirked. You're within range of my divination. He leapt forward, launching a palm strike, and spun around her, beginning another. Ichi Sho, Anai Sho, Shur Sho, Hachi Sho, Juroku Sho, Sanjuni Sho, Hak, Rokujian Sho. It came as quite a shock to the Hyuga clan that Niji was capable of the Rokujian Sho, but what came as even more of a shock was that each hit passed straight through Shizuka. The greatest shock was that when Niji was finished, those with the ability to either sense chakra, or see it, could see barely a spark within the boy's arms. It was as if they hardly existed. The logic of your attack is flawed. Attack an enemy with the well-known ability to absorb chakra, and with the previously documented ability to deform around physical attacks, with a high focus, chakra-heavy attack. To use such a move against one such as I was among the worst, if not the most brash, moves possible. While such a move may have worked against one such as my sibling, even he has skills you know not. To rely on such an attack is weakness itself, if not pure folly. Both it and your rotation techniques are little more than one-time use abilities in combat, for if witnessed once, a countermeasure is easily applicable. The assembled Kage were quite surprised to discover that Shizuka was in fact correct. The Kaiten and Rokujian Sho were more often than not high-profile moves dedicated to one-on-one combat. That such a glaring weakness had been overlooked for so long was insane. Of course, now that the explanation was out of the way, Niji found himself on the receiving end of an immense swarm of Kikeichu while he did his level best to defend. He was soon consumed by the cloud. Once the vapor of insects dispersed, Niji was to be found lying on the ground, unconscious. Shizuka was rather surprised by the uproar, most of which appeared to be coming from the Hyuga clan, but merely dispersed to reform next to Shikamaru. Nara-san. I am aware of your discussion with Dosu. At this, Shikamaru stiffened slightly. I have no intentions of giving away the element of surprise, however I must alert my clan. I have already sent a message via Kikeichu, but I will need your assistance in order to alert the others. Hi. Looks like we're going to war after all. Mendokus. Back at the arena, the next match will be Hyuga Hinata vs Inazuma no Nami. Hey Jime, so 2 right-hand using kunoichi, fighting to the death, eh? This should be good. Nami commented to Hinata, who replied with a small smirk, indeed. May Rai-sama be favorable to us. Having said this, the two flew through identical seals with great speed. Upon completion, both kunoichi began to rush around the arena in opposing directions. At the last second before the two collided, Nami went into a slide while Hinata leapt over her. In unison they cried out, Kaminari Megami, Kyusokuna Aikyo. Lightning Goddess, Rapid Impact. As soon as the syllables were intoned, their fists flew toward each other, colliding as the two passed each other. The resulting impact caused them to fly away from each other, each landing where the other had started from. To be able to use a technique rarely seen outside of Kumo, I'm impressed. I would assume that you received several scrolls in apology for that attempted kidnapping all those years ago. Yes, the Hyuga were able to come out the better. However, it was mostly due to the fact that the ambassador had the gall to request Tusama's life as payment for the death of his minion. Intriguing. However, only a few years of training is nothing compared to what we do in Kumo. Kaminari Megami, I know sure. Lightning Goddess, death of the opponent. With a flash, Nami burst forward, her right arm coated in lightning. Before any could react, her arm was plunged through Hinata's chest, bursting from the other side, accompanied by a spray of blood. The gasps of the crowd rapidly turned to cries of shock as Hinata's body burst into a crackle of electricity. Those self-same cries turned to cheers as Hinata appeared at the other end of the arena in a similar burst of lightning. To all those viewing, a further shock came at the sight of the lack of a wound on her. The Shin no Kaminari Bunshin, but that's impossible. That technique is a kinjutsu even the Reikage can't preform. For one of Hai no Kuni to be able to preform it should be completely impossible. You forget yourself. Yours is not the only country with those who possess an affinity for the right-hand techniques. While it may be rare within our country, those who possess it have a tendency to wield it in spades. Combine that with the natural Hyuga chakra control, and you create what some might consider a demigod. On that note, I think you will find your control to be shot, seeing as your arm was completely through its chest. So that those watching may have some idea of what we are speaking about, I shall explain. The Shin no Kaminari creates a bunshin out of pure, natural lightning. The technique perfectly recreates the human body, allowing it to go so far as to generate chakra by expending its own base form. The only reason you were able to survive my Kyusokuna Aikyo was thanks to the fact that the Shin Bunshin only has a fifth of the original's power, most of which is used to hold the form. It used that fifth to ruin your control for the next hour or so. The jutsu it used required it to utilize its own power, and since I had to form it almost 2 weeks ago, that was all it had. What you hit was essentially pure chakra. But that should be impossible to be able to withhold a lightning bolt for 2 weeks and even then to destabilize a chakra system. I see the match. As the duo walked to the mezzanine station, Nami whispered into Hinata's ear. As soon as she had done so, those watching were shocked to see the shorter of the pair turn and preform a series of juken strikes on her counterpart. Before any could react, Nami stood, shook hands with Hinata, and left. At last, Hinata was able to walk back to the contenders box and her friends. The arena, the fourth match. Aburaim Shino vs Uchiha Sasuke. Hey Jime, I look forward to the oncoming combat, Uchiha-san. HN. The match began with Sasuke dashing forward, kunai in hand. He took a few swipes, only to miss as Shino leapt backwards. Again, Sasuke rushed him, trying in vain to hit the Aburaim. However, it was all for naught as Shino merely walked backwards, unscathed. One would think, Uchiha-san, that if a strategy were to fail then one might try another. As you wish. Gokaku no Jutsu. As the fireball roared toward Shino, the bug user quickly sunk into the ground, prior to the fireball impacting his previous location. Unbeknownst to the Uchiha, Shino had also taken the time to move directly under him. Imagine the boy's surprise when the ground beneath him burst into insects, dragging him into a pit full of Kikeichu. Kikeichu, Kancho Utsubayo. Kikeichu, insect depression, Shino intoned as he rose from the ground, his Kikeichu returning to his coat as they brought an unconscious Sasuke from the pit. The crowd was silent for a moment, before bursting out in applause, and in a rapid turnabout, Uchiha Sasuke has been knocked out of the ranks, leaving it down to the final match. And the contestants are Sabaku no Gaara against Uzumaki Naruto, the later of whom is conspicuously absent. Unfortunate though it may be, I must. The announcer was cut off as what seemed to be the gates of the underworld thrust upward from the end of the arena opposite the Kage box. Before anyone could even cry out in shock, the gates opened, revealing 9 figures standing before a dark vortex, clad in what seemed to be Umbu armor, each a different color, in order being colored tan, a burning blue, a dark purple, a color akin to red clay, the lightest of turquoise, a green to match the shells of most beetles, a purple the color of an octopus, and fiery red. They exited the dark vortex, standing on 9 points of a star, leaving the final point clear. A 10th figure finally appeared within the vortex, wearing similar armor, except for the fact that it was the same deep purple as a snake, with inlay of what seemed to be pure gold. The figure wore an Umbu mask and accompanying purple hood in the form of a wolf, colored gold with purple designs of Celtic origin on it. The figure walked to the final point of the star, at which point the self-same star glowed with a darkness so powerful. It appeared to be pulling in the very light in the arena, making the entire surrounding area darker. As silence fell across the arena, the 9 original figures returned to within the gates, which closed, and slowly returned to the earth, leaving a scorched length across the earth. The crowd began to murmur before immediately becoming silent as the figure removed his mask and pushed its hood back, revealing a very calm Uzumaki Naruto. Upon realizing who was before him, a murderous grin appeared on Gaara's face. "Will you prove my existence to you, no Naruto? I'll do my best, Ichi no Gaara." To the surprise of all watching, the sand around both of them began to swirl around them. As the sand reached its peak, twin spears of sand appeared over the two's shoulders, slightly unnerving Gaara, before flying at each other. The one coming from Naruto's direction split around Gaara's, before reforming beyond it and continuing onward. Immediately prior to the impact, each spear dissolved to gather behind the two, Naruto's spear joining Gaara's gourd, and Gaara's forming a singular wing behind Naruto. The two nodded to each other, before disappearing from view and clashing several times in the surrounding arena. The flashes that those watching could catch revealed Naruto wielding a claw-shaped katana while Gaara's hands flew with a tan kodachi covered in what looked like blue tattoos. After several minutes of this, the two appeared in the middle of the arena, swords locked. It would seem this clash will need more effort. "Shall we, Gaara? After you, Naruto-san." No sooner had the words left Gaara's lips than identical auras of tan grew around the duo, each grinding against the other. The two Jinchuriki leapt backwards, their auras continuing to ram against each other. Naruto took the initiative, launching a barrage of sand at Gaara, who promptly returned fire with an even larger wave. After nimbly dodging the wave, Naruto disappeared in a burst of speed, materializing in front of a shocked Gaara. "Whatever it takes, take the hit. I know about the invasion, and that you're the signal. I don't care what you have to do, just do it," he said, unleashing the entirety of Shura's yokai into the arm he held. After a moment of recovery from the shock, Gaara nodded. "Hi Naruto-senpai." Naruto launched himself backwards, before running through a set of seals. "Yum cake swayim in, Ichi Saikuru." Dream lacking sleep, one cycle, a wave of chakra flew across the arena, hitting Gaara square in the chest. Before his body could even hit the ground, a platform of sand rose beneath him, catching the Jinchuriki. As the announcer called out Naruto's victory, the platform carried Gaara's body off to his siblings. The crowd was quiet for a moment in shock, before the Kage stood, and began to clap quite loudly. This action was rapidly copied around the arena, resulting in a wave of applause larger than any so far. As Naruto walked off the field, Hiruzen turned to the other Kage, and nodded, his intent instantly clear. The others nodded in return, smirking at the surprise of the crowd. With the Konoha Genin and Sensei, how did the dead last pull that off? Kiba cried out, shocked at just how much stronger the boy had become since he had faced him. The same way Naruto-kun has done everything. Through hard work and an immense amount of training. Since the month began, he found Jiraiya of the Sannin, and convinced the man to train him. Halfway through, Team 11 along with Jiraiya-sama were tasked to retrieve Tsunade-sama, so that Konoha could be returned to its previous strength, especially with the finals approaching. In return for helping her, Tsunade-sama gave our entire team training as well. Hinata elaborated. At this, Fury nodded. Tsunade-sama was also on hand to provide healing after we tested some of our higher caliber moves. Although the damage to the surrounding area was much worse than what Naruto-san took. Enko in turn bobbed her head, remembering just how much chakra the restructuring seals had taken just to put down a layer of dirt over the crevasse. Among the other sensei guy immediately assumed a nice guy pose, such as only he and his student could perform, shouting about how Naruto's flames of youth had exceeded both his students and his own. Kakashi just sighed at his rival's antics, while wishing that Sasuke had put up more of a fight. The council was going to have his ass for that. Before the next round of competition, there will be a 30-minute intermission. Concessions, amusements, and mementos are available in the stores nearby. The announcer decried. 30 minutes later, the first match of the second round will be Aburame Shizuka vs Sabaku no Temari. Hey Jaime, my hive is quite excited with the challenge at hand. I do hope for a good fight. Shizuka intoned. Just hope I don't scatter them to the winds, kid. Temari retorted. The fight began as Temari launched a futon jutsu at her opponent, only for Shizuka to quite literally split in half, revealing her current composition. To her credit, Temari didn't even break her stride, merely pulled out a kunai and tossed it at the girl, causing her to catch it, prior to noticing the explosive tag on it. Shizuka rapidly dispersed, but wasn't quite quick enough to avoid her hand becoming engulfed in flame. As she reformed, she noted the lacking limb, and rapidly replaced it with one of her sai. The ensuing image was quite odd, giving her the appearance of a prosthetic limb in the form of a sai, sans handle. Temari paused a moment to take in the strange sight, before restarting her explosive assault. Shizuka, however, was just as apt at tactics as her twin, dispersing into the ground the minute the first explosion occurred. Temari halted her assault, mentally questioning whether or not it was a trick. Her wonderings were cut short by a savage impact to the stomach, followed quickly by one to the base of her neck, knocking the girl unconscious. The crowd erupted into applause, as a mezzanine team took Temari away, and Shino handed his twin what seemed to be a black gourd similar to Gaara's, though on a scale more similar to a large duffel bag. Shizuka took the gourd, promptly popping the cap, releasing enough of her reserve hive to reconstitute her hand, before recapping, and placing the gourd on her back, nodding to her brother who was wearing a similar gourd, which was slightly larger. If one were to be near the Aburaim section of the arena, one might note the rather large amount of insects crawling around. While this was nothing new, what was new was the fact that black gourds were appearing next to each member of the clan, subtly preparing them for war. The Yamanaka, Nara, and Akimichi sections were no different, the Yamanaka remotely alerting, and linking the shinobi on duty, and those among the crowd, while the Nara were preparing every possible plan of attack, as the Akimichi members began to eat at an increased rate, the increase being unnoticeable to those unfamiliar with the clans. The remaining Sarutobi members, mostly consisting of very well-trained civilians and retirees, seeing as the Hokage and Asuma were the only active shinobi, not counting Konohamaru, were all prepared for war prior to even coming to the event, on the Hokage's request. I had seemed odd at the time, but considering the circumstances they agreed. The shinobi of other nations were also preparing, having been alerted by their kage. Some could be seen tensing slightly as a Yamanaka connected for the first time, or slowly running a whetstone across a blade. Others could be found fingering kunai, while several Kumonin appeared to be generating static electricity on a scale that had their entire section's hair quite literally standing on end. As the announcer called out the second fight, being Shino versus Shikamaru, the crowd had a buzz, a feeling of preparedness and a hint of paranoia. The lazy and the bespectacled shinobi stared at each other for a moment prior to launching an all-out assault, quite unlike any yet seen. Shikamaru had used his shadows to launch an immense number of shuriken, which Shino's Kikeichu caught and returned quite forcefully, slashing through the shadows before swarming forward in vast numbers. However, to those who knew what to look for, this wasn't a case of two teens having a death match. This was a warm-up and a conversation. The Kikeichu released pheromones based on what pattern of shuriken were launched at them, alerting the Aburaim, who relayed the information to the Yamanaka, who in turn relayed it to the Nara. Each volley constituted a new plan, each return was the reply. The Nara were using the Yamanaka to form a hive intelligence, which could unfortunately not communicate directly with Shikamaru for fear of him losing track of what he was doing, and being seriously injured. They also couldn't link him in because no matter how smart they all were, Shikamaru had proved from a young age that he could match the collective, formerly called Kokoro, Mind My original, piece for piece, battle for battle, strategy for assault. Once, when he was 10, Shikamaru had been linked into Kokoro. The resulting intelligence had within seconds come up with an answer for anything asked, but the price was that everyone linked was essentially unconscious, sans Shikamaru. Despite its usefulness prior to a battle, in combat it was all but useless. Finally, a plan was forged, and the two shuriken launching shinobi turned instead to a rapid bout of taijutsu in which Shino ceded the match to Shikamaru. Despite how quick the match had been, the kage knew just how much had gone on within, and agreed on promotions for all of the prior battles as well. Third battle of the second round. Aburaim Shizuka vs Uzumaki Naruto. The winner will fight Hyuga Hinata. Heijime. Shizuka faced off against Naruto, glasses glaring in the sun, before the duo nodded and began their combat. Unlike the previous battles, there was to be no information passed. There was none left. All that remained was the actual combat. They ran at each other, sai and nodachi in hand, before meeting in the middle, clashing for a moment, and leaping backward, identical waves of shuriken launched at each other. Once more they clashed, sparks of metal flying as the weapons hit. They flew around the arena, wave after wave of shuriken and weapon clashes occurring. After a few moments, they once more appeared in the center of the arena, beginning the taijutsu match of the century, limbs ablur as arm blocked leg batted away by shoulder, kunai dodged, and wounds dealt. Right as the two were about to go into their ninjutsu, something happened. Something big. Within the arena, an immense explosion launched the combatants backwards, leaving them both embedded in opposite walls. Within the center of the blast crater, now stood a slightly hunched, bald, pale-skinned man, with a white goatee, clad in a leather armor as black as the night. Before those within the arena could cry out in shock, the man raised his hand for silence. Good people of the elemental nations, I stand before you with a simple message. Give in to the darkness or die, he said in a rather rough, amicable voice. There was a pause, before the gravity of what the man had just said sunk in. Then, one man panicked. It was to be expected, of course. An immensely powerful man had just gotten past the entire defenses of the strongest hidden village. If he could do that, then he could do it anywhere, anywhen. The poor man was just a store clerk with only a week before retirement, and he had planned to use his winnings on the matches to buy a rather nice house, just on the edge of the village. Unfortunately, he still panicked. And as he did so, a wave of pure and utter panic flew around the arena. Within seconds the entire arena was a horde of chaos. The man merely chuckled as several creatures of seemingly pure darkness, the only visible features being two glowing yellow eyes, with elongated limbs, and two rather large, bent antennae, formed around him. The creatures instantly rushed the civilians, tearing through them, leaving only husks in their wake as more formed from the remains. Before they could reach the center of the nearest section, the shinobi at last reacted, attempting to slash into them with various weapons, only for them to have no effect. Those shinobi that were slaughtered generated not only more of the black creatures, but a gray, stretched-out creature, with black lines containing what seemed to be bursts of light along them, and a triangular head and a zipper where a mouth would be. The shinobi that became such beasts had no corpse, it instead having stood up and become the gray monster. These two began to attack the population. By this point, Naruto and Shizuka had pried themselves from the walls, only to be set upon by the rampant beasts. Naruto reached out for the feeling of Kitsun's fang, of which he had learned its true name, being Nenshotsume, burning fang, and pulled, preparing to draw it from the very air before him. As he did so, he felt something similar, something almost yearning to get out. He reached out with his right hand, grasping the hilt of whatever it was, and pulled both out, twirling the handles as he did so, before ending in an open stance with both swords facing out. The new sword in his right hand was unlike any weapon he had ever seen. It was seemingly composed of a blue metal, similar in color to a sapphire, varying in brightness, with a large single-spoke gear forming a circular hand guard, the spoke functioning as a handle, wrapped as such with an exquisite material Naruto had yet to identify, with a handle not dissimilar to a bicycle brakes. The blade consisted of a long worm gear connecting the handle to the tip of the blade, and a no-dachi-length blade attached to, and extending further from slightly below the gear, acting both as a guard for the gear, and as the primary method of attack. On top of the tip was an elaborate gear set that connected to a gear of slightly less size than the handle, upon which a clock face was to be found. Naruto grinned to himself, as he judged the weight of it. It seemed so light, so right. Like it was made to explicitly mold to his hand. It also felt as if it had only one purpose, and that was to tear into the creatures before him. His grin grew as Naruto launched forward, slicing and dicing, causing the black creatures to dissolve into what looked like a heart that dissipated after a few seconds, and the gray to just cease to be. Despite the fact that no one else was seemingly able to attack the beasts, Naruto took to the task at hand with extreme prejudice. With the genin competitors, those who had been in the Medwing had already been prepped for battle thanks to a Kage Bunshin of Tsunade who had rapidly repaired any damage, before dissipating from chakra loss. Their shock at the slaughter in front of them, and the fact that hitting them did absolutely nothing, was almost on par with the civilians. Luckily the Jonin managed to break them out of it in time to dodge a veritable wall of the black creatures. As they escaped the competitors' booth to the arena, they were even further shocked at the fact that where other ninja were being slaughtered, Naruto was having the time of his life carving up the monsters. Their surprise jumped again when Gaara leaped into the fray, his kodachi forming even as he flew through the air. Hinata and Fury nodded to each other, before growing smirks on par with their teammates, before Fury drew his swords, coating them with a diamond-like powder, and Hinata uncertainly drew a pair of swords in a similar fashion to Naruto. The swords that WER revealed formed a rather odd-looking pair. The handle was a diamond-shaped bar of dark purple metal, with a similarly shaped rectangular handguard that surrounded the entire handle, with large diamond shapes on the corners. The blade was an immensely sharp diamond bar of kodachi length, ending in a bend that curved to form the outline of a heart, never quite reconnecting to the blade. As soon as the weapon was in her hand, she gained a look of striking resolve, and she moved as if she had used the swords her entire life. She leapt and flipped between the enemies, using the swords in the fashion of a pair of hook blades to grab the foe's limbs, and practically rip them off. Fury could be seen with his mask on, and a pair of leg augments in the form of rabbit hind legs. All that the watching ninjas' heads as they watched the three in combat twist, flip, and perform rather obscenely flexible acts of parkour, was this: where the fuck did they get those swords? This shock turned to hope when a bunshin of Naruto appeared, and rapidly explained that all they had to do was coat their weapons in chakra. Those present could only face bomb at the fact that such commonly used technique would actually be their greatest weapon. Grins similar to that of those present emerged on their faces as they all pulled out their weapon of choice, before rushing into the fray. As soon as the man had appeared, the two older Kage tensed. They recognized the man, and they knew he recognized them. This was someone who was supposed to be long dead, who had showed up during the first Shinobi War. He had seemed so different, and yet so similar to how he was now. The younger Kage could only wonder at how the man had gotten past their defenses, and why only a troop of genin had so far figured out how to fight them. To all of their surprise, the man leapt onto the roof of the Kage box, where they had been standing since the man arrived. "Gentlemen and lady, I wish to offer you a choice. Join me, or die trying to stop me," he announced. In response, Materumi stepped forward, and summarized the thoughts of all the Kage in only 2 words: fuck. No. Chapter 15. Of course you know this means war. The day had started relatively well for Uzumaki Naruto. He got up, had a bowl of ramen with the 9 most powerful beings in the world, grabbed his stuff, and went off to compete for Chunin rank. It was a damned shame that all of that had gone to hell when he had shown up. That sadistic, manipulative bastard. This new timeline had been going so very well. But of all people, the one man who could ruin it just had to show up. The one who had been responsible for helping Madara Uchiha during Alpha. The one who helped slaughter all of Konoha, Suna, Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri. The man who had granted Madara the ability to use the Rinnegan in the first place. The man behind every move the Akatsuki had ever made. Zehanort. On the man's command, his home, and every other village had been systemically wiped out, each person dismembered before being forced to lay host to more of the monstrous creatures of darkness, beings the man called heartless. Those that had resisted were just used to make the nobodies, elongated creatures of pure nothingness. By the time he had caught Naruto, all of the village's sans Konoha had been utterly destroyed, and the only reason his home wasn't was that he and the other Jinchuriki had been protecting it with all their might. But it wasn't enough. The Heartless ignored the civilians and other ninja, flinging them to the side as they forced their way toward the 9. All of them had fought valiantly, but the numbers of every other nation on the entire continent quickly overwhelmed them. Over the course of the next 9 days, each Jinchuriki had their beast extracted in order, killing all in the process. Gaara, Yujuto, Yugura, Rashi, Han, Utakata, Fu, and Bi were killed through the immense pain caused by it, and the loss of yokai. The worst part had been the screaming. It was a sound that could only be produced by one thing. The sound of ultimate suffering. On the final day, the remaining rookie 9 attempted a rescue. Each was in turn methodically slaughtered before Naruto as the Kyuubi was torn out of him. Finally, just as the statue had finished siphoning Kyuubi's yokai, that bastard Xehanort appeared, Hinata in hand. Before his very eyes, she was murdered. Gutted through the use of an overly dull knife. Before her body had even hit the floor, Naruto became the one thing he had never truly been, before or since. He was enraged. With a burst of light, he had activated the Rinnegan, and proceeded to throw Xehanort through several walls, and finally wound up at the same falls that Madara had faced the Shodaime, and that he had faced Sasuke. The monster of a man before him had merely chuckled before standing up, and entering a portal of pure darkness, out of which came Madara and Sasuke. The ensuing fight resulted in the entire universe being spent as a way to get him to the next timeline. Alpha was no more, and now he was back, and he was going to do it again. Naruto felt only one emotion about that. Pure and utter rage. As he tore through the surrounding Heartless, he took a moment to familiarize himself with the weapon he had just summoned. He was able to use it as if he had it his entire life, and he knew this was only one of the forms it could take. With an evil grin on his face, he turned to find a wall of nobodies encircling him. His dark smile grew as he instinctively used one of his new weapon's abilities, Tempest. With his cry, the dancing creatures before him froze as the clock on his sword began to tick down. Naruto disappeared for a moment, only to reappear behind the offending nobodies. As the hand hit 0 with an ominous gong, the nobodies began to turn toward their target's new location, only to fall to pieces as they did. As he continued on through the crowd, Hinata was working her way toward him. She leapt and bounced as her swords diced any who came near her. She landed to find herself amid a group of rather potent survivors, all of whom had garnered several large wounds. Hinata rapidly spun, before unleashing a flurry of fireballs with a cry of Ignis as the creatures surrounding them fell to the flames. She crossed her sword skyward. Kuraga! An immense flower formed above her, before scattering to the winds, whirling around the fighters, healing them completely. Before they could call out a thanks, she had already continued, cutting her way toward Naruto, who himself was headed for the Kage box. Above said box. Interesting. Despite the display of unbeatable force, you still resist. Why is that? You see, I'm something of a scientist, and I've never much liked the, shall we say, limitations conventional science lays upon us. I've always taken a bit of pleasure at seeing a subject break absolutely. You 5 are quite interesting. Not challenging, but interesting. No matter, let us begin. The man before them elaborated, before reaching out his right hand, and seemingly pulling an immense, ornate gray sword with a vibrant blue demonic eye at the tip and hilt out of nowhere. Xehanort's birth by sleep keyblade. In response, the Kage and their guards assumed a battle stance, Yugura unhooking his cane, as Inoki flew back a bit, beginning to gather a cube of white powder. Hiruzen threw off his robes to reveal his battle garb, and summoned Enma in staff form, while Shigeru proceeded to pull gold dust from a gourd that had been strapped to his back. As A's body began to flicker with lightning, the man rushed forward, being blocked by a swing of Enma, before leaping back to avoid the hooked cane that came his way. As he landed, he was pummeled by a gold-fringed cube of white energy, ready to crush him. When he raised his hand, a hexagonal barrier rippling into being. After a few seconds of holding the cube back, he lightly tapped the barrier, causing the energy cube to fly off, as the man calmly walked forth from beneath the cube's borders, wiping a bit of rubble off of his shoulder, as he chuckled. I suppose if you're to face me, you should know something. My name is Xehanort, and I will be slaughtering your pitiful village today. As he finished his sentence, A flashed into view directly behind him, arm cocked to hammer the man's head. Before his fist could even near Xehanort's head, he found it blocked by what seemed to be a sword made entirely of black and red gears. A flipped back to find a figure dressed in black armor, with red organic highlights, and a black face plate before him. I'm afraid I can't let you do that, was all the figure stated before he flashed behind A and batted him away with his strange sword. As A flew past him, Yugura flung out his cane, yanking the man to a stop by the bangles on his wrists. Head-on won't work, this child carries too much power to be natural, Yugura stated rather blandly, a look of disgust on his face as someone else took the role of young bruiser from him again. This kid, he's no joke. We gotta move, before we choke, or else we're broke. B cried, as he and N.A. both blurred away, reforming in front and behind of the armored youth. Double lariat, Reflaga. The boy said calmly, watching as the two were thrown backwards by the energy barrier that sprung to life around him. Jiraiya, already on it. Kami no Ketsugo Shiru, Fyun. Binding seal of God. With his declaration, an immense kanji for Kami appeared in front of the boy, before wrapping him in it, causing Xehanort to chuckle. Well done, you've taken my apprentice out of the fight. A pity he was the only one of us who might not have killed you. Eroga. As he finished his intonation, Xehanort was lifted by an immense black wind, before being rushed toward the Kage. He landed in their midst, and promptly began to tear into them, not even bothering with his blade, leaving it impaled in the ground where he once stood. One by one, the Kage were thrown around like children's toys by the force of his strikes. He then proceeded to take down each of the guards, dissecting their every move and turning it back on them. Tsunade was thrown backwards unconscious by the force of his return punch, while Jiraiya found himself bound by a black energy, before being knocked out by oxygen deprivation. Yujito held on the longest, managing to land a strike on the man's face with a burst of Nibi's fire, leaving a burn scar that would never quite leave across the man's forehead. Unfortunately, this left an opening for the boy in armor to take her out, having finally worked his way out of Jiraiya's seal. As the two turned to leave, intent on leaving the Kage with nothing to hold dear, a certain blonde finally reached the roof. Xehanort! Naruto cried as he swung his blades at the man before him. Predictably, Xehanort lifted his sword to block, only to be blindsided by a lilac burst of flame. The youth turned to face the new challengers, as his master pulled himself out of the wall. Uzumaki Naruto, how do you live? The very universe you once inhabited is now destroyed, laid to waste. I should know, I barely had time to leave before you brought the whole thing crashing down. Funny how these things work out, because thanks to your shenanigans, I was able to gain my apprentice. You see, the thing is, you've dedicated yourself to the light. In the process, the darkness within you was magnified. Said darkness festered within you, growing into a completely new being. I believe you've met him once, during his angry phase. You called him what was it? Ah yes, Yami. From within the masked armor, Yami chuckled. It was thanks to that encounter, and your subsequent, shall we call them misadventures, strengthened me to the level I needed to be at. That whole fourth great Shinobi war, that was all an excuse to get you to use my tainted power more, allowing me to become more powerful. Yes, a shame that the process that had been completed by the death of your friends led to that disaster of a final battle, in turn leading to the splitting your heart, forcibly removing the darkness. I came across the boy amidst the darkness not long after I left you in the evidently none too capable hands of Madara and Sasuke. A pity you survived, but a fact I intend to remedy. At this, Xehanort leaped for the blonde in front of him, aiming to bisect him with a single move, only to be blocked by the boy's blades. Before he could react, Naruto grabbed the trigger of his new sword and twisted the entire handle, resulting in a flare of yokai being forced through the blade. As the sword was lit with the force of the Nibi, it began to tear through Xehanort's. The elder grunted in shock, before changing tactics and forcing a shard of the roof to fly up, nearly decapitating Naruto. The Kage finally got over their shock, and leapt forward into the battle, joined by their guards and Hinata. They were all quickly intercepted by Yami, who knocked them all back with a blast of darkness. Before he could continue his assault, he was intercepted by Hinata, a look of rage burning on her face. I've got this guy, go help the village. They won't survive without help. She barked before launching a flurry of icicles upon her target. The others nodded before leaping off to go defeat the Heartless. So you're the one that caused my separation, eh? Can't say you look like much. The only interesting thing about you are those swords of yours. What say we see how they do against mine, HM? With the Genin. After several minutes of fighting, the Genin had successfully cleared the main stands, and were able to begin assaulting the nobodies that had gotten away, having already discovered that if both Nobody and Heartless were defeated, the victim would be revived, exactly where they had been when they fell. Having rapidly abused the tactic of throw all the kunai, the stands had been rapidly cleared, enabling the shinobi forces a fighting chance in the long run. After about 20 minutes of anguished fighting, the creatures fell back, coinciding with the arrival of the Kage and their guards. One particular crowd of the beasts remained, surrounding Gaara and Furyu, the two sand wielders back to back, Gaara holding his kodachi, and Furyu standing over the broken remains of his swords. Despite, or perhaps, because of the diamond powder he used to increase his attacking power, his swords had become brittle, almost glass-like. All it had taken was one last hit from the claws of a shade, and they snapped. Those remaining outside of the sizable crowd of monsters watched in abject horror as the two were rushed, Gaara holding them off, as Furyu evidently grieved for his swords. However, not even the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi could hold off all of them, and at last the dusk warped its almost serpentine body around the red-haired boy, claws at the ready to carve up the immaculately dressed Genin, when Furyu's head snapped up, and he blurred away, appearing behind the dusk with a new sword in hand. The sword was of kodachi length, and looked remarkably like Gaara's, with a similar pattern and hilt, albeit with a blue blade and tan highlights, but that was where the similarities stopped. The blade gave off an aura of pure darkness, almost devoid of light, as the tan markings wriggled and glowed, as if the blade itself was alive. The hilt held an eye, one of a light yellow, and a four-pointed star-shaped pupil, a black dot in between each point. As Fury looked over his new blade, he was snapped out of his thoughts by Gaara's sword appearing in front of him, an identical eye glaring at him from the hilt, and blocking another Dusk's attack. He responded in kind, kicking up a wave of sand that flung the Dusk forward, just enough that he could dice it into pieces. The two now stood, back to back among a veritable sea of enemies, as a deranged smile graced Gaara's face, and a similar smile took to Fury's. Then, as one, the two rather similar boys took the fight to their enemy, dashing among the crowd, swords a flurry as one by one, and then by the dozens the fiends began to fall. After a few minutes, the radius of 10 feet had been cleared, and was rapidly increasing. Within 10 minutes, the remainder of the beasts had fallen. The two teens were on their knees, at the center, leaning on each other for support. I don't believe I ever properly introduced myself. I am Furyu, the gentlemanly ninja, and you, Gaara of the desert. Your abilities with the sand, are you perhaps related to the Kazekage? I don't know, in all honesty. I was orphaned when I was a child. If I may, after this is all over, I would like you to speak with my father, the Kazekage. I have a feeling he might have some information that would interest you. Fury nodded, before standing and offering his hand to Gaara. Gaara took the hand, heaving himself up as the last few remaining monsters took off at them in a burst of desperation. On the roof of the Kage box some 40 minutes ago. So, little Naruto-chan. I see you've gotten stronger. Not much, but stronger nonetheless. Xehanort goaded. A shame you stayed the same. Shall we test just how much stronger I've gotten? For the sake of science, let's. The two then leapt at each other, blades a flurry as sparks and shards of metal flew from the impacts. Once more, they clashed, as Naruto took the opportunity to rev up his new blade, the Nibi's flames bursting forth from the metal. After a few clashes, Xehanort flipped backward, before unleashing a barrage of black flames, forcing Naruto back as he attempted to block them. As he blocked the fireballs, he was forced steadily back till he was practically against the edge of the roof. He stumbled, as Xehanort appeared above him, using his greater mass and a gravity spell to swing harder still, throwing the boy off of the roof, and into the distance, a distinctive crack being heard almost across the entire village, inciting all fighting to come to a halt for a moment, as all combatants watched the body of the blonde go flying back. Naruto-kun / Naruto and I / Naruto-senpai. 3 cries rang out, as Hinata, Furyu, and Gaara disengaged from their current fights, dashing after the flying body. Yami laughed at the sight, before warping back to his master. So, have they satisfied you for now, Master Xehanort? Yes, I suppose this shall have to do for now. The elder stated before raising his voice, his wind spell carrying it further still. Let this be a lesson, and a warning. Darkness shall rise, and you, the light, shall fall. It has happened before, it shall happen again. So mote it be. I take my leave of you, but I leave a final warning. You shall have 5 years, no more, no less, to raise an army to stand against me. I have taken this opportunity to show you my power, that you might know just how much help your village will need. I, and I alone, in single combat have just taken out your best fighter, and I haven't even broken a sweat. My apprentice here took on not only the Kage, all 5, but also their cohorts, and held even combat till he was sealed. You have 5 years beginning now. Chapter 16, Aftermath. A week after the Battle of Konoha saw Naruto at last awaken, having been knocked back off the rooftop, and thrown through 5 buildings and had wound up leaving an impact crater a mile out from the outer walls, almost 200 meters across, just from that one blow. A heavy rain had begun, acting as mourning of those lost when a massive outbreak of Heartless managed to escape, a swarm of nobodies following. Almost 2,000 people had been transformed into the beasts, and only 700 had been recovered before they escaped. The grief from an attack, in the middle of one of the most guarded events in the world, in the strongest nation on the continents, could not be evaded. The 700 who were recovered were changed, never to be the same again. The streets were heavy with sorrow, and the rain. All one would see looking out the window would be rain, completely covering the city. Naruto did just that, staring out the window as he had since he had woken up. He was supposed to be one of the strongest people in the world, but that belief had been shattered by the attack. Xehanort hadn't even broke a sweat against him, despite the fact that the man had a permanent scar across his forehead. The monster of a man hadn't even blinked as the fires of the beasts had scorched his face. Then there was the man's ultimatum: 5 years to get stronger, to create a better world, to unite everyone. That would in all honesty be easier than facing him again. The man's strength terrified him. He had, with one good hit, thrown him over a mile, with enough remaining force to create the crater rapidly becoming known as Uzumaki Lake, thanks in no small part to the constant rain. Ironically, it reminded him of AIM, where he had faced off against Nagato and Konan. Unfortunately, he realized, he might have to do it again. Over the last year, he had really just been goofing around, not getting much of anything done, especially since he, of all people, knew that what happened before would again. Naruto sighed, clearing his head as he continued to watch the rain. After a few more moments, he looked at his hand before slowly pushing chakra into his eyes, watching his vision speed up, as the world slowed and became more colorful, shifting into the somewhat familiar realm of the Rinnegan, before pulling it back, slowly turning his eyes back to normal, as his rings slowly shrunk back to coalesce into a singular pupil, as his sclera shrunk back to normal, fading into the normal brilliant blue. He hadn't really used the dojutsu since he came back again, and it felt good to be sure he still could. From what he had read while researching his new ability in Alpha, the Rinnegan worked by increasing the speed at which vision was interpreted, and by increasing the variety of something in his eyes called cones, which evidently affected what colors he could see, the more the better. It was what let him see chakra in all its forms, even what color of chakra someone had. For years people had thought that chakra was always the same blue, thanks mostly due to the Byakugan and the Sharingan interpreting and highlighting it for the user in a bright blue. As close to the truth as this was, chakra came in most every variation of color imaginable, only appearing blue when it condensed and moved, causing an effect known as blue shift. His own was gold with bits of deep purple mixed in, that he could view at any time, regardless of whether his Rinnegan was on or not. It had been something he had always had, a little ability that made him feel different and special. Of course, no one had believed him when he was little, given his propensity for pranking. A whispered word to himself, and a flame the color of his chakra flared into life a few inches in front of his hand. The Nibi's flames, mixed with whatever abilities that Q had given him in Alpha, and fueled by his own yokai. This was the power he had been granted by connecting the Ichibi of both timelines, unlocking Nibi's yokai and powers for use. From what little he could do from his bed, he had discovered that any of Ni's chakra would set it whatever it touched aflame, regardless of how little or big it was. The major problem with this was, if he were to try and attack with both Anai and Shura's abilities at the same time, the flames would instantly glass whatever sand he used. And while he could still utilize the silicon in the glass, it made it that much harder to control. It would be a while before that would be happening. With a sigh of exasperation and exhaustion, he fell backward, letting sleep take him. Within the sleeping Bijuu's mind, a council was meeting. If we do nothing to help him, the kid won't survive his next encounter with that bastard. We have to teach him the Bijudama, and now. I'm not arguing that point. What I'm arguing is that we need to go and reconnect with our alternates. Without them, we are reduced to little more than voices in his help. He'll need all of us to survive, not just a powerful attack. The current argument was over what to do first, teach Naruto the Bijudama, or reconnect with their alternates, as an onlooker might have gathered. Each option had their advantages, but the main difference was the latter required Naruto to leave the village, opening both he and the village up for attacks. At last, the conversation had ground down to a halt, leaving Q and Hachi to duke it out. I'm telling you, we need to train him before he goes outside again. You saw what happened, he was utterly destroyed against him. Which is my point, he needs the others so that he can get control of their yokai, raising his abilities further. But if he can't protect himself long enough in the first place, then dash. QS rant was cut off when the normally demure and polite Gobi spoke up. Will you both shut up? For crying out loud, he is the Juubi. If anything, we should be warning those in his path. Yes, he is powerful, but Naruto can become even more so. Our first order of business should be getting he and Jiraiya on the road again, and see about fixing up Orochimaru so that the village isn't totally defenseless when they leave. And if there are any more objections, I will personally gut the offender. Shocked and slightly embarrassed at the fact that they had been called out on petty infighting, the two uppity Bijuu lowered their heads, mumbling in unison, Yes, Gobi. Naruto awoke the next morning, a buzz of activity running through his head. A quick inquiry to his residence only told him to go and get Jiraiya, and that the two of them needed to go on another training trip. Shaking his head in wonder, he pulled himself out of bed, quickly changing into his cloak, finding it repaired as usual, and materialized a pair of dusky orange cargo pants, deciding on forming a dark purple mesh shirt as well, before walking over to the window, and in true gutsy ninja fashion, leapt out, disregarding the yowls of the nurses. A several-minute search ended at the Kage Tower, as Naruto hopped in through one of the windows of the Kage's office, just in time to dodge a chair thrown at him. What do you mean I need to leave? We need you here, now Jiraiya, not off training him. An irate Tsunade cried at the Toad Sannin. I mean, that kid is our best hope. Regardless of how much we might need to rebuild, we need him stronger more. You were there, you saw him fighting. He was literally the only thing standing between that guy and destroying the village. And he got thrown a mile off, and managed to break the vast majority of his bones. You tell me if rebuilding works out when in 5 years that guy is just going to come back and curb stomp us again, regardless of how pretty our buildings are. Tsunade was about to retort, when Naruto cleared his throat. Funny, I just came here about the same thing. Gaki, how the hell are you out already? All of your bones were broken, I know. 10 Bijuu, remember? Kinda makes healing easier. Speaking of whom, they told me to get to you, Jiraiya, and that we need to train. Ha! Told you Tsunaheim, the kid needs me too. Shut up, you insufferable brat. Why Gaki? Why do they need you both out on the road? It might have something to do with the fact that if we were to train here, the village might be destroyed. A demure voice noted, the Gobi appearing amid the three ninja. Shocked at the intrusion, Tsunade had her fist cocked and ready to swing when Jiraiya caught her arm. A glare was responded to in kind by the Toad as he nodded toward the person before them. Remember the Bijuu he just mentioned? That's one of them. Gobi, if I'm not mistaken. That would be correct, Jiraiya-san. Though the destruction of this village isn't the only reason. You might have noticed that after encountering Gaara, Naruto grew more powerful, as did Gaara? That was due to our iteration of the Ichibi, Shura, merging with her counterpart. This in turn allowed her to turn over full control to Gaara, and Naruto was able to unlock Nibi's chakra. As a side effect, they both grew exponentially stronger. In order for Naruto to reach his full potential, he needs to reunite all of the Bijuu with their counterparts. Fine then, I suppose there's nothing much I can do to stop you two anyways. This will be an SS rank mission. Jiraiya, you are to take Naruto, and train him for 3 years if not more. If possible, you are to make contact with any of the other Jinchuriki, and allow the Bijuu to coalesce. His protection and well-being are your top priorities. I don't want him out of action come the deadline. Your secondary objectives are to attempt to form an alliance between the nations, and not just the big ones. From what we've seen, we'll need all the power we can get to face off against this bastard. Finally, you're to take Naruto's team with you. I don't think Hinata and Furia will be able to train much here, not without getting someone killed. If at all physically possible, I want you to try and get the other Jinchuriki to come with you. Naruto being the strongest, and technically the oldest, unless he can get B's memories back, will be their best hope of training, given that he was in an alliance with them in Alpha. You leave tomorrow. The two gutsy ninja nodded, Gobi dissipating the bunch it inhabited, and they turned to leave, intent on alerting Hinata and Furia to the mission when Tsunade stopped them. Oh, and Gaki? What's this I hear about you being able to assimilate bloodlines? Chapter 17, Training, Year 1, 7 months later. It was hard to believe that 7 months had already passed. 7 months, and so much to tell of. The first month had been comparatively the easiest, mostly getting all of them, even Jiraiya back up to snuff, before each began to train on their own projects. Furia and Gaara, having been picked up from the Suna encampment on their way out of the village, had been training almost exclusively with each other, giving the other what tips and tricks they'd learned with both the sand and their swords. As it had turned out, the sand control had slowly begun to become a family trait over the decades, so much so that by the time Gaara and Furia came about, born to twin mothers at the same time, though Furia was lost in a bandit raid, to evidently show up in Konoha, almost everyone in the clan had at least some control of particulate. Though all in all, Furia had the most potential seen so far, in that he had control of the widest variety of particulate, ranging from common dust and sand, up to diamond and chakra crystal dust. The two sand cousins had been experimenting with their swords, discovering several interesting properties. First off, they garnered them a whole other level of control over the sands. They also had the odd ability to be both dissolved into material, and to be enriched with more material. This of course rather quickly escalated into mine is bigger than yours, as teenage boys are wont to do. The inevitable finally occurred when Gaara wound up channeling Shura through his blade, leaving it larger than the entire camp. Hinata had been badly in need of aiming practice, given that the vast majority of her new techniques were very lethal, which in turn coincided with Jiraiya deciding to have the sand cousins use it as agility practice, seeing just how fast and maneuverable they could make their sands. He himself had taken to sparring with Naruto, which led to having his ass handed to him a few times, but began to balance out as he got his body back into the swing of active duty. Over the second and third months, they had traveled to the village hidden in the clouds, anticipating the least resistance to the idea of an alliance there. The sum result was another girl lusting after Naruto, 2 apiece for the sand cousins, a fresh horde of fanboys for Hinata and Jiraiya, and 2 new Jinchuriki traveling along. The only snag had been who would protect the village though, a snag thankfully taken care of by B's team stepping up to the job. The new arrivals were brought up to speed on what had happened in Alpha, Naruto imparting Nibi into Yujito, and promising to do the same to B when his turn came about. The 4th and 5th months had been spent traveling the mists of the village hidden in the mist, and proceeding to lead the uprising against Yugura, the final confrontation leaving several thankfully abandoned islands as wastelands. In a move that had taken several hours of maneuvering, B had finally managed to get a hold of the Sanbai long enough for Naruto to warp next to him, and tag him in the face with Sanbai's aura. The resulting meltdown had taken several more hours for the poor fellow to recover from. Despite the harshness of his rule under Madara's control, he himself had been a rather kind and caring regent prior to his loss of control. They left Mizu no Kuni another Jinchuriki strong, Mei Terumi in charge, and Naruto another step up the ladder of Bijuu. The 6th and 7th months had culminated in an immensely risque madcap dash across IWA as they tried to find Rashi. Today was the day they had finally found him, along with Han and Utakata, facing off against 6 rather familiar members of the Akatsuki. The battle had already commenced by the time they reached them, and the combined forces of the 8 new members of the battle and the 3 already entrenched succeeded in routing the forces of Kisame, Itachi, Kakazu, Haiden, Sasori, and Deidara. As both groups introduced themselves, Naruto in quick succession passed along the iterations of their Bijuu, causing each of the 3 to almost instantly change attitude, from that of apprehensive strangers to instant friends, reminiscing with those who had already had their memories retrieved. As they tucked in for the night, the only thought on everyone's mind was, 8 down, 1 to go. 5 months later. It had taken 5 months. 5 flipping months, but finally, they had done it. Fu had finally been found and tagged, and at long last B could be recombined. He stood tall, the rapper silent for once as Naruto approached. Over the past year he had undergone another growth spurt as they had passed his birthday, reaching to a little under B in height. Now a lean, Well-built 15-year-old, he was nearly back in the shape he had left the world, only a bit away from his physical limits at that time. He still wore the purple and gold armor from the Chunin exams, the hood hanging loose around his neck while his swords were in sheaths matching their colors on his back. A closer look at the armor would reveal the subtle seals engraved within the gold inlay, forming storage arrays and repulsing structures, designed to enable the wearer to contain an oncoming attack, and return it, or to dodge around it altogether. Between the plates of armor could be seen the matte black links that made up the chain link connections between them, themselves formed into sealing arrays to enable them to move as if weightless. Walking closer to the broad-chested Kumo man, Naruto reached his arm out, hesitating a moment before calmly placing his palm on the man's forehead. A blast of energy shook the area as two Bijuu reunited in unison, the duo at the epicenter of the shockwave. Finally, another burst of energy split the two apart, sending them sliding backwards. A wave of pain hit Naruto as he felt a force, pushing its way to the surface. In a panic, he shed his armor, the plates barely hitting the ground before an ocean of pain slammed through his body, sending him writhing on the ground. As the others approached in fear, he had one thought on his mind, before he lost it completely. "Get away from me!" As his voice changed from his normal tone to a much deeper, much more wrong tone, a shiver went down his companions' spines, before they scrambled, grabbing the barest necessities along with what they couldn't afford to lose before practically flying out of the clearing they had been camping in. Seeing them go, he barely could let out a sigh of relief before yet more pain hit him, wringing a howl of pain out of him, carrying far and wide the notes of pain, anger, and grief traveling to the four corners of the earth. The very ground around him shook, as his body began to glow with a purple and gold energy, the force pulling his limbs into bizarre shapes, the pain becoming almost unbearable. With a jerk, his body wrenched forward, ankles elongating, bursting forth with a horrific sound. His arms snapped into place, fingers pulling together as a thick layer of purple fur began to grow from the middle of his back, the massive amount tearing through the light clothing he still wore. Another burst and bones began to assemble around his body, first forming a ribcage, then growing a spine which stretched to match his own, and growing further into what could only be a tail. A massive skull began to form above his own, as limbs resembling the form his own now held grew downward, eventually lifting him off the ground as the energy spread outward, grasping onto the skeletal form. It flowed over the frame, muscles forming in its wake. After a moment, it reached the head, muscles forming before the energy washed over it again, leaving flesh and eyes behind. As it finished its last wave, fur flew out, leaving a massive, purple wolf with gold designs curling over its body, writhing in time with the wind. Its eyes flashed open, a blank, mindless look in its blue eyes as the beast's jaw flew open, unleashing an earth-shattering howl. Miles away, Hinata turned her head back, glimpsing the massive creature that was Naruto, her kind, caring, loving Naruto. Now, all that stood there was, the Juubi has awoken. Chapter 18, Awakening of a Beast. Its eyes flashed open, a blank, mindless look in its blue eyes as the beast's jaw flew open, unleashing an earth-shattering howl. Miles away, Hinata turned her head back, glimpsing the massive creature that was Naruto, her kind, caring, loving Naruto. Now, all that stood there was, the Juubi has awoken. The howl rippled through the air, tearing leaves from the trees and birds from the sky. Around the party, small creatures fell past the branches they were standing on, either stunned or dead from shock. The group themselves nearly fell. The sheer power embedded within the howl had whipped the air currents into a fury, a visible wall of pressure flying past. The Jinchuriki stood strong, though a shiver ran up their spines as their Bijuu, old though they may be, cried out in an urge to join their other halves within the massive frame. Furia and Hinata, steeled against yokai as they may have become over the past year, still found themselves gasping for air against the pure power of the force as it made itself clear. Damn. We've got no choice now. We have to do that. Jiraiya murmured, as B nodded with him, the strongest available Jinchuriki acting as leader for the moment. Rhymes left in the wayside of the chaos to come. Yo, Fu, what's up? Think you can get me and Rashi up there? Easy. Want air support? 'Cause your options are me and Gaara at the moment. Both of you, get in the air. Jiraiya, how much time you need? Given our distance to the nearest village, I'll take anything I can get. 20 minutes would be preferable, but I can make it in 15. Got it. Fu. With a nod, Fu flung out her tails, as they rapidly took the form of immense, iridescent green wings, her arms reaching out to grasp the outstretched hands of B and Rashi, as her tails began to move with such speed that the branch they stood on began to crack. Achieving liftoff, the trio took off toward the giant wolf, Gaara following suit aboard a platform of sand, a fair portion of sand remaining behind to gather more if he so needed it. Grabbing up the slightly shell-shocked teens, Yujito took off toward the wolf, Utakata and Han rushing close behind. Yagura nodded to Jiraiya, before partially transforming into his own form, wrapping his tails around him and proceeding to rotate with great speed, finally rolling out at high speed, bouncing off of trees and crashing through rocks as he went. Jiraiya sighed at the slightly over-the-top travel methods of the Jinchuriki, before turning to his own work, rolling out a giant scroll and pulling up a brush and ink, flowing some chakra through it as he began. Pain. Pain was all he felt, all he was capable of feeling. The pain, coursing through his veins, now flooding through his head. He let out a scream, but as it left his mouth, it changed, not into a louder scream, but into a yet louder, more powerful howl, the long, low notes hanging in the air as he closed his jaw. A loud hum buzzed by his ear, causing him to growl in irritation as the noise echoed, growing louder still. The noise cut out at that, followed by 3 distinct pinpricks of weight between his shoulders, with 3 energy signatures that almost seemed familiar. The pain came again, bursting through his torso as waves of energy ripped up, slamming into the weights on his shoulders. There was a pause, as a moment of almost bliss passed, before the signatures from before became amplified, the weights landing on his back again, before growing rapidly, the feeling of bone and flesh washing over his skin as the signatures solidified. With roars of effort from each of his children, tentacles began to wrap around him, attempting to lock his limbs into place, before more waves of energy began to rip them apart. They kept coming, however, the speed being to advance beyond what the energy could destroy. As his limbs locked into place, he let out a roar, a shockwave of energy slamming into the largest of the 3 aboard him, flinging the massive octopus off of him. The tentacles melted away into ink as their creator fell away, but were soon replaced by coils of lava, the burning heat attempting to melt into his hide. A shudder ran through his body as the energy running through him underwent a change, shifting its very essence as it grew more fluid and less chaotic. With a growl of effort, the new energy came forth with a swish of one of his tails, a small flood taking form as it moved, before rushing over his body, steam flying off of the lava. Another swish, and the comparatively small ape found itself head over heels toward a nearby mountain, the form flickering out as it approached impact nearby the large octopus-shaped hole. A blast of wind hit his face, feeling as if it were a gnat against a tree for all the good it did. He rose his head, massive eyes seeking out a target, latching onto the view that was an enormous beetle. A swish of a tail, and a blast of wind twice as strong flew forth, narrowly missing the insected. A volley began, he firing on repeat, the bug dodging as best it could. All for naught, however, when a double shot slammed into it, knocking it clear out of the sky. It slammed to the ground, pain screeching from it as several of its wings were impaled by trees. He slammed a tail into the ground, a pulse of chakra bursting forth, scanning the area for miles around. Finding a location of proper population, he began to turn, only to be stopped in his tracks. A glance down would reveal his feet to be swarmed in sand and earth, swirling masses of the material barely holding him down. A growl began to grow in his throat, as the energy rose again, tails slamming down, washing away the earth beneath him. He moved forward, only for a gnat of a being appear before one of his eyes, hovering on a platform made of the same as had held him down. A voice began to speak, barely reaching his ears. He snorted, the gust throwing the being back, and earthward. Again it came, and this time, with more. 2 other beings were aboard. Before he could force them back as well, something, deep within, began to push. Small at first, but gradually growing, pushing with all its might. He pushed back, attempting to force this new issue back where it had come, only for it to return with twice the strength. As the smallest of the 3 aboard the platform fell to its knees, a voice finally burrowing through, at long last succeeding in breaking the trance that had come over him, all with one word. A name. His name, Naruto. The trance shattered like a frozen pond. One moment he was looking down at them, the next, he was being caught by a bed of sand and lowered to the ground, no longer towering over the forest, but instead falling into sleep like the mountains of old. The moment he felt the bed catch him, all went dark. The party of 11 gathered around the sleeping body of the boy who had just nearly slaughtered them all, peaceful rest only interrupted by the occasional snore, garnering a chuckle out of them. When Gaara and Furia had caught him, he had been surrounded by a burst of energy as black as night, which then evaporated seconds later to unveil Naruto in a new outfit, a long, purple and gold cloak with 10 magatama embroidered on the back, and a headband with horns that went back and over his forehead, reaching a little behind his hairline, and rising up about an inch above his head, the emblem on which, however, had caught all of their attentions. The symbol was for Shinobi, no affiliation, just Shinobi. Speculation was traded back and forth, but none of the group could come to a clear answer. The next morning, Hinata awoke to the sound of exertion. She almost went back to sleep for a moment, before listening a little closer. That pitch, that cadence, it could only be one person. He was back. Her Naruto. She rose, walking steadily towards the noise as she pulled at the edge of her shirt. She carefully avoided branches, twigs, and other debris, silently making her way across the forest floor, before coming upon the clearing where they had trained previously. She sidled up behind a tree at the edge, watching on as hundreds upon thousands of clones, with varying degrees of energy flowing about and between them, charging a solitary Naruto, his swords held loosely at his side. As she activated her Byakugan, his eyes ached at the sheer power emanating from the team, as the waves slammed into him. At the forefront, a swords-using clone and a sand user both attempted to break through, but he dodged, almost effortlessly as he swung left and right, attacks barely missing before he twirled, bringing the full force of his considerable strength to bear, the air igniting with the speed as the blades slashed forward, tearing through the reinforced clones like paper, before a wave of energy continued on, crackling forth as it ripped through the wall of clones, eventually stopping after cutting out a vast swath. A twitch of his head, and he ducked, A sneak attack missing terribly as yet more felt the wrath of a raisin shuriken, shimmering all the colors of the rainbow. A grin, and a rev of his blades, and the air itself gave way, the world itself seeming to crack around where he stood, reality growing tears as the blades swayed, left, right, and then nothing. The ground where once stood a fair third of the force was gone, the trench nearly 20 meters long, and almost 10 deep. Not even the smoke of dispersing clones escaped the attack. With renewed vigor, the remainder advanced, blades a-twirl as an almost solid wall of jutsu and weaponry filled the sky. As it moved, he blinked. He blinked again. He lifted his hand, and with the least bit of effort pushed. The ground rippled again as what could only be described as a wave of sheer force bit forward, returning both attacks and defenses on their makers, bowling over what little had escaped the wrath. She gasped at the power, raw and utter, that her friend could exhibit. With such strength, and such power, how could she, a tiny person, do anything to help? She began to turn to leave, when a hand fell on her shoulder. She shrieked, a sound quickly muffled by the hand covering her mouth. Hinata! It's okay. It's just me. She breathed a sigh of relief as the hand fell away, the familiar sun-kissed face of Naruto filling her vision. Naruto, what are you doing up so early? After what happened yesterday. I know, I should be in bed, but after that change you saw how much I can do. I need to be able to control this or I could crush everyone whenever I put a stronger jutsu than a clone. But now that you're here, there's someone I want you to meet. Here, hold my hand. She blushed, before taking it, allowing Naruto to guide her to a meditative position. Alright, this is where it gets a bit weird. He closed his eyes, as a feeling of falling overcame her. She closed hers as well, only to reopen them to find herself looking at herself. There were some differences, such as a bit different hairstyle, and the version of her before her seemed to be a bit older, but it was almost as if it was. That's you, Alpha you, I mean. She was pretty much everything to me. I did what I could to protect her, but in the end, it all meant nothing. I failed. This is all that remains of her, trapped here in my memories. I can show them to you, if you like. Before she and the others were captured, Ino was able to use one last jutsu. It triggered on death, pulling their memories from their dying minds and shoving them into the nearest friendly brain. Hinata was the last of them to die, the last in a chain of memory transfers that ended in her holding all of her friends' memories being held in her head, before she died. As she died, I felt it. It resonated through me, and their memories hit me, almost breaking me as I took in every event all of them had ever experienced at once. You're the only one I want to offer this to, but if any of them ask, I'll tell them the same thing I'm about to tell you. I can give you your counterparts' memories, but it will hurt. Like nothing has ever hurt before. This won't be like with Jiraiya or Tsunade, where they could pick up their past memories from the world itself, or the Jinchuriki getting them from their Bijuu. This will hurt, body, soul, and mind. Once it begins, there's nothing I can do to stop it. Will you take this burden, or will you pass? I'll take it. I need to know what happened, what we were, everything. What if Naruto Bijuu Sage Mode Chunin exams, Kin and Taiya, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.